Focus. Hello. Righty then. Are we ready? Everything's working, right? It streamed for a little bit, so yeah, looks like it. Should be good to go. Although the audio might need to be a bit louder. How do I do that again? Hopefully that's not too loud for me now. Could probably be even louder for you guys, actually. Yeah, that should be good, and then I will also just get up the chat thing if I can remember how to do that. Yeah, nice.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games.
Here we
Welcome
go.
to our live stream. We have a busy lineup today with announcements for Path of Exile 2, as well as the exclusive reveal of Path of Exile Necropolis, which launches on March 29th. For the first time ever, we'll be releasing this expansion simultaneously on all platforms, PC, Mac, and console. Twitch drops are enabled on today's live stream, so make sure you follow the instructions below in order to claim your Suffering back attachment. Today's stream will start with Path of Exile 2, where Jonathan will show you our latest announcements. Mark will then take you on a deep dive into the new Path of Exile Necropolis Challenge League, which launches in 1 week. He'll cover the league mechanics, its deep crafting system, large endgame changes, some improvements to the core Path of Exile campaign, and finally some quality of life features. We'll then show you our new supporter packs, and we'll head into a live Q&A session where Ziggy D will ask us your questions from Twitch chat. After the live stream, we'll drop the full patch notes.
Hell yeah.
Hey guys, it's time to chat about PoE 2 again. It's only been a few months since we talked about the Mercenary, and yet even since then a huge amount has changed. When we announced the Mercenary, we also showed off a lot of the new capabilities that our engine has around animation and character control. Moving while shooting was a huge deal in that class, but there were a lot of other more subtle things going on to make it feel good too. Well, in recent times we've only been showing off new character classes, but one thing I've been really excited about is to go back and apply all the new ideas and capabilities that we have to our old classes too. Today I'd like to show off the Ranger, and I hope that you guys like what you see.
So focus on PoE 2 first. I wasn't paying enough attention during the
I've lived in this forest all my life. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that a ranger must never miss. A beast will hunt you, but it is the cruelty of man I fear.
I'll take your finger!
There is no truly escaping the Count's justice.
Your sentence is to be hanged from the neck until dead. Let your souls feed the first ones, and your bodies feed the land. After her!
Fury! This exile has changed me. No more running. No more fear!
You won't get away this time.
I will put an end to this madness.
Mounts? Excuse me?
Let this be a warning, Gianor. I'm coming for you next. Let the hunt begin.
When we started to work on the Ranger, we knew we had to make a class with high agility. The dream of fast bow gameplay is Legolas, so that's what we wanted to deliver. The starting point is moving while shooting a bow. Any kind of basic arrow skill can be fired while moving, with a movement penalty. This immediately gives you a lot more freedom on the battlefield. Here, I'm starting each battle with a poison burst arrow to poison groups of enemies, then using a lightning arrow to arc lightning around larger packs. For even more mobility, we also have a variety of skills that involve vaulting around the battlefield too. This is Frost Escape. Using it jumps backwards and shoots a freezing arrow at the ground. Really useful if monsters close on you and you need to get away. Once you've landed, if monsters were frozen, it'd be nice to have some way to take advantage of that extra time. This is where Snipe comes in. Snipe is a skill shot that you need to charge up and release at exactly the right time. If you land the right timing, Snipe is guaranteed to produce a critical strike, and does a small AoE as well, so it's a great finisher.
Nice.
You can also move while shooting arrow rain skills too. This skill is Lightning Rod. It shoots an arrow into the air that sticks into the ground, and does a small AoE. Once the rods are in the ground though, they attract any arcs of lightning that are nearby, causing them to explode again. This means you can stack up a bunch of lightning rods on the ground, and bounce lightning between them, doing way more damage. Now this takes care of packs pretty well, but for bigger enemies I'd like to have something that's going to enhance my damage output too. This skill is Stormcaller Arrow. Using it sticks an arrow into an enemy. After a short period of time, a lightning bolt comes from the sky and strikes them. This has a high chance to shock them, and shocked enemies take 30% more damage from all sources. If something big walks along, it's a good idea to throw one of these at them first to enhance your damage, before following up with the other combo. Now, if I really want to enhance this combo, there are a couple of things I could do using our support gem system. Skills in Path of Exile are granted by items called skill gems. Each skill gem has coloured sockets in it, and these sockets are for other items called support gems. Support gems
the actives in
modify
our
your
circle,
skills,
the
and that's where a
supports
huge
of
amount of the
the other shape.
customization of your character comes from.
I changed it.
First, I'm going to take this multiple projectile support gem. I could add it to my lightning arrow, and it would fire multiple arrows. This would increase the number of targets I can hit, but that isn't the effect that I'm after. If I add it to my lightning rod skill instead, then when I fire it, I get a nice group of rods. This means that I don't have to spend as much time setting up before I can use it with my lightning arrow combo. I might also add faster projectiles to make the lightning rods land faster too. Now next up I'm going to grab this chain support gem. Chaining causes many effects to repeat on new targets when you hit them. If I add it to my lightning arrow, it will cause the arcs that come out of lightning arrow to strike even more targets, rippling along my line of lightning rods for huge amounts of damage. Now I think we can use support gems to improve Stormcaller Arrow as well. Let's start simple. I'm going to chuck less duration on here. This will cause the lightning from the sky to strike a bit faster. Next up we have a support called Shock Proliferation. This support makes it so that any enemies shocked by the skill will also have the shock jump to nearby enemies, meaning they'll take the extra damage as well. It's just a chance to proc, so it's not going to proc on every single pack, but when it does, a pack will go down ultra quick. Another useful empowering skill is Barrage. Barrage is one of the rare cooldown skills in PoE 2. It enhances whatever your next attack is to fire 3 times. With what we have here, I think it might be a good idea to use it with Lightning Arrow. It'll generate 3 times as many lightning explosions. You could also use it at just the right moment with Snipe, or any number of other skills depending on what effect you need more of right now. It's very versatile and can be used in a range of situations. Now, even as mobile as the Ranger is, it's still very useful to slow monsters down, and a Ranger certainly has quite a few tools to do this. If you're prepared to get up close and personal, we have a skill called Electrocuting Rod. First, jump over the enemy and shoot it into them. Once the rod's in place, any lightning damage they take will build up a special electrocute gauge. Once the gauge is full, the monster is totally suppressed, allowing you to kill them easily.
Interesting.
Now, sometimes when you use Electrocuting Rod, the enemy dies before you get a chance to electrocute them. I think there's another support gem I could add to my Lightning Arrow to fix this problem. Neural Overload will make it easier to electrocute enemies. If the skill it's attached to puts them over 50% of their electrocute bar, it will trigger instantly.
Oh, those mobs look so crazy. Density's still pretty good by the look of it.
Now, this skill works really well for suppressing a single large enemy,
So that scroll
but I'd
was
like
from
to
auto
improve my
picked up.
crowd control ability
Almost
for
looked
groups
like
as
it.
well. I'm going to add a support
Maybe
gem
it
called
clicked it.
Frozen Nexus to my Frost Escape. This makes an area of chilled ground around frozen enemies.
Well, actually,
Also add
possibly
Deep
hidden
Freeze
loot
to it as well,
doesn't
which
hide
will make the
gold.
freezes last a bit longer.
No, that's staying. Oh no,
Now,
disappeared
when I
after
use
a
my
certain
Frost
amount of
Escape
time.
on
Yeah.
that front enemy, others nearby are slowed down. It would also be good if I had a way to slow enemies down when they're farther away from me as well. So this would be a great time to start getting into the Ranger's poison and plant-based skill set. To start with, let's have a look at Vine Arrow. This skill fires an arrow into the air that creates a small plant where it lands. The plant sends out tendrils to nearby enemies, slowing them down and poisoning them. But it does have
Poisoning them?
another function too. If the plant gets further
Or is it
poisoned, it
just a dot?
transfers that poison to the monsters it's attached to. Normally you would only be able to get 1 stack of poison on a monster at a time, but you can put as much poison as you want on this plant.
It's normally a
You
cap
could just
of
use the plant to
one
slow
poison?
monsters down and not worry about the poison part. But if you
Interesting.
want to go all in on poison, this is the way to do it. Now, if you do want to focus on poisons more, another useful skill is Poison Bloom Arrow. This skill creates these plant pustules on the ground. If you wait a little while, they'll explode. Just like any other plant skill, these plants respond well to poison. Shoot the Poison Burst Arrow at enemies nearby and watch your plants
It's
grow
so
more and
interesting.
more
They've like
powerful.
split Toxic Rain into
Poisoning
2
the pustules
skills.
causes them to do much more damage and makes them explode much faster as well. I can also add the Pierce support to Poison Burst Arrow. Doing this will mean I get multiple poison bursts as it goes through each monster. We also have another skill to make a
That's
nice
the time.
environment for your plants to grow. Gas Cloud Arrow. This skill shoots the ground and creates a cloud of gas that continuously poisons things inside it. Throw your plants down, then put a gas cloud on top. The constant poisoning will make them grow.
Sorry.
Another poison-related skill we have on the Ranger is called Plague Bearer. This is a reservation skill, meaning it uses Spirit. When I enable it, I get this counter that counts up whenever I apply poison to a monster. You can see the counter on the skill increasing as each new monster is poisoned.
Please don't tell me.
Now I'm going to fight these monsters and
turns
make
on
sure to
immediately.
poison them as much as I can to build up the counter.
You still need control over to when you turn it on and off, right?
It does take quite a while to get the counter up to 100%, but it's worth it. Whenever I choose, I can unleash the poison in a big explosion around my character, dealing a large amount of damage.
No. It's a single hit now.
Now next up we have a classic, Rain of Arrows. It's simple. Shoot a bunch of arrows in the sky and they rain down for a short time. It's decent
Duration
AoE
based.
and damage at long range.
Interesting.
Now this skill doesn't last too long, but we can change that. It's time to introduce frenzy charges. Frenzy charges are used for a variety of skills on the Ranger, but with Rain of Arrows they can be used to extend the duration.
You're mine.
How do we get some though? Here we have a skill called Sniper's Mark. Put it on an enemy and it will grant you a frenzy charge when you crit them. Now remember that snipe skill from earlier? That skill guarantees a critical hit. So first we Sniper's Marked an enemy, then we sniped them. And after that, the next Rain of Arrows will last a really, really long time. We still have some weaknesses though. While Rain of Arrows hits enemies with a ton of arrows, each one doesn't do much damage individually. It would be nice if we had a way to break the armor on enemies so that Rain of Arrows dealt more damage. Thankfully, we have this Corrode Armor support gem, and we can put it on our Gas Cloud arrow. Corrode Armor causes poison to erode the armor on targets until it's all gone. This will significantly increase the damage that Rain of Arrows does against armored targets. Oh yeah, and one more thing about gas clouds. They can be detonated with explosions.
Oh, yeah,
I have an explosive arrow here. Let's check it out.
Still.
Now, because monsters and gas clouds are likely to have their armor broken, I think there's another useful combo we can do. This is an exploit weakness support. This support provides extra bonus damage to targets that have their armor broken. Perfect for what we have going on here. So, those are just some of the skills we have on the Ranger class in Path of Exile 2. Now that we've seen all these skills, let's see how well they do against a much tougher enemy. It's time to fight the boss of the temples, Thanos.
Kitava's cursed madness never ends! Orius Radiant! Chaotic power!
Yeah, both boss fights looking so good now. Doing much damage, buddy. I hope we get a similar spiral support for Rogers.
Kill swiftly and move on. This is how you survive.
That's the Ranger. But oh yeah, there was one more thing. The mount. Check this out.
Yeah.
Yes, you can ride a rower. While riding the rower, you can shoot arrows with no movement penalty. It's pretty overpowered. You can also use your vaulting skills to jump right off the rower's back. Once the rower doesn't have a rider, it starts attacking monsters, so he's nice to have around, even if you're not riding him. That said, if you are riding, don't get hit. If you take a heavy stun while on a rower, you'll fall off, and it takes a while to get up, so be careful. So that's what we wanted to show you today. Now there is just one more rather unfortunate bit of news. Path of Exile 2's beta is going to be delayed.
They're
We
pushing it
previously
back.
said that we would get the beta out on June 7th. And while I think we would be able to get the game's content ready in time,
Brutal.
we underestimated how long it would take to get gameplay polished to a standard that we're happy with. We're still going to be doing alpha testing in June, but we're going to be delaying the beta until later in the year. I don't have an exact date for you today, but it should be towards the end of the year. In the meantime, you can still play Path of Exile 1, of course. Now, speaking of PoE 1, we also have the 324 expansion to announce. I'm going to hand over to Mark, the game director on PoE 1, to show us what's in store.
We had a lot of fun making this one, so let's just get straight into it with the trailer for Path of Exile Necropolis.
Cold flesh, dirt, maggots, and ghosts. Our job is to keep them where they belong. It's your first night, so you'll need this. A ghostly lantern for ghastly tinkering. You'll learn to peer into the souls of the dead. You'll learn how to twist them. Meet
What's going on here?
in the Necropolis. You can pilfer shiny things from a corpse, but you can pilfer glorious things from a soul. I need a gravedigger.
Tier 17 maps. Oh, there's still different tiers of scarabs. Interesting. Penultimate boss. More transfix, beautiful. This music is amazing. Wait, heist boss changes? Oh, egg.
The job's hard, but the pay's good. What do you say?
In the Necropolis League, you will encounter Undertaker Aramor, a man collecting the scattered spirits of the Eternal Empire for a mysterious purpose. These spirits have begun to haunt the monsters of Rayclast, unleashing their ancient fury and sorrow onto the world. The Undertaker will provide you with the Lantern of Aramor, a powerful family heirloom which can illuminate the wrathful spirits haunting monsters throughout Rayclast. With it, the Undertaker hopes to employ you to rid Rayclast of this menace, and further his cryptic cause. The lantern can be used when entering any new area. When peering through it, you can examine the spirits haunting that area. The lantern also allows you to manipulate them, letting you configure which monsters are affected by which mods.
Wow.
It would be wise to take your time with your decisions here, for the spirits are not forgiving. When peering through the lantern, you can also
like
see
that.
extra details about the packs of monsters in the area. Rowers here are considered common, whereas the water elementals are more scarce. If you want things to be easier, you can put the more difficult spirits on the elementals, which you'll encounter less often. We've tried to make sure that by engaging with the lantern, you are able to intelligently control the difficulty in the Necropolis League. The spirits come in a number of forms which represent the danger they pose. For example here, the infested vultures are servant haunted, causing them to deal a small amount of increased damage. But the Vol's Vanguard are noble haunted, causing them to deal a large amount of increased damage. As you reach higher level areas in Rayclast, the tier and number of spirits that are haunting monsters will generally increase. Your game knowledge can help you here. If you're aware of the composition of a monster pack, this means certain mods will be easier to manage. For example, the mod that increases a pack's damage for every monster killed has no effect on packs with a single monster, like a Devourer. However, if we found a spirit that makes the strongest monster in a pack deal 100% more damage, well, I'm going to avoid the Devourer. You might have noticed that the Lantern of Aramor provides other useful information, such as the types of abilities monsters use or the damage types they deal. So for those who are less familiar with how these monsters work, this can be a great way to learn what you're up
Name's
against.
already taken.
The spirits are constantly moving throughout Rayclaw.
Thought I'd try and secure
So if you're
Aramor
finding
as
a
a character
campaign
name.
area too difficult, you can just wait a few minutes and peer through the lantern again to see what's changed. Of course, powerful spirits beget powerful rewards. There are 2 reasons why you might want to face a challenge now and then. Firstly, not all the spirits are malicious. Sometimes the monsters aren't haunted at all, but are instead devoted. These can grant basic rewards like increased experience, or bigger rewards like spawning the Nameless Seer, an NPC that will grant you a single unique item after you defeat all of the packs affected by that spirit.
He's back, baby.
The more haunted monsters you defeat in the previous area before using the lantern, the more likely the devoted monsters will appear in the next area. Monsters haunted by higher tier spirits will increase the chance of the devoted appearing even more, meaning that sometimes it's worth putting the hardest modifier possible on very common monsters, if you're brave enough. Again, we've tried hard here to allow players to customize the danger and rewards as much as they can.
600% increased
Aramor is an
experience. That's so
undertaker,
good.
and you can probably guess what we're taking to him. The second main reward from the Necropolis League is monsters with unresolved anguish. Once slain, their corpses need extra care from the Undertaker, and he will offer to take them back to his necropolis and store them in the morgue. Time to earn your keep. When you are ready, you can visit the morgue to view the monsters you have collected, and then get to work burying them in one of many graves in Aramor's cemetery. For example, we will bury this Katava's Herald. Aramor's mysterious soul experiments can coalesce powerful items. Here I've chosen to create a pair of boots.
So that makes it more likely to have plus 50 weighting. Interesting.
These boots are useful for my character, but aren't exactly what I hoped for. And this is where the Necropolis crafting system really shines. You'll have noticed that the corpse we collected earlier had a crafting effect on it. In fact, all collected corpses do. If you bury multiple corpses in the cemetery, all adjacent corpses can be exercised at once to create one item. All of the crafting effects on those corpses will apply to that same item. This allows you to have either one or many different crafting projects ongoing in the cemetery. For example, next time I try to create boots, I could bury corpses that increase the chance of getting move speed modifiers. To go further, I could use these to generate higher tier modifiers. Then, I could try to bias it towards being an evasion pair with this. Finally, I'll apply some crafting effects that improve the probability of getting good rolls. Now, let's craft our item and see what we get.
So you don't have to fight them. Interesting.
As you can see now, we have a much better pair of boots, forged from the souls of our enemies. You could even use the entire cemetery to craft one item. There is always something you can do to try and ensure your item will be as best as it can be. We hope to see some really crazy grave crafts. If you are lucky, you might find corpses with meta crafting modifiers. These can be buried to manipulate your crafting projects in more drastic ways. This one increases the potency of all crafting effects of adjacent undead corpses. Another meta crafting modifier gives a chance to drop an extra item from your craft, with all the same crafting outcomes applied. All you have to do is bury a lot of undead monsters.
May the ferocity of Throldana free you of your anguish and aid this soldier, so that you may shield the...
It's gonna drop 2? Yeah.
You can also craft
And they're
new
not
unique
duplicate.
items exclusive to the Necropolis League using this system.
Interesting.
As you explore Rayclast, you might find the corpses of famous Eternal Empire families. And when you bury an entire family together and exorcise them, they will thank you with a unique specific to their lineage.
Cool. Do they get influenced by the other modifiers, so I'm curious.
For example, the Navalius Inheritance Belt. I'll give you a moment to check that out. You can use other corpses alongside them to grant implicit mods,
Didn't get enough chance to
manipulate
look
the
it up.
values of explicit mods, and more. In this case, with the Parandus Pact, you can even change the modifiers it generates. This unique is a jewel which adds extra stats to passive skills in a radius when socketed into the passive skill tree. The stats it adds are randomly generated, but you can bias it towards a specific type by using other crafting effects, such as this one, which increases the chance of getting life modifiers. Let's see what we get. Damn, we didn't get it this time. I guess we're gonna have to go and collect more corpses. Of course, you can trade the corpses away to other players. All you need to do is purchase empty coffins from the Undertaker and use them on your corpses in the morgue, which will itemize them. Another item in the Necropolis League that you can find are Embers of the All-Flame. These are monster spirits that remain living in the All-Flame, a powerful ancient artifact of Rayclast. And you can set them free by placing them in the Lantern of Aramor and defeating them. These embers drop throughout Rayclast as itemized packs of monsters. You are able to use these packs to replace the packs in areas. For example, we have found this All-Flame Ember of Tarfoa.
Tattoo.
We can now
Tattoos?
go to enter the next area and replace one of the monster packs in here. You can see we have also gotten one of the devoted modifiers to appear. We can pair up the Karui ancestors with this modifier, making them even more rewarding. Let's go ahead and replace the tentacle miscreations. However, when replacing packs, you want to double check their density, as the new pack will inherit the density of the replaced pack. The Karui ancestors we have now added to our area can even drop basic variations of tattoos. If you aren't aware, this is an item type from the Trial of the Ancestors League, which can be used on passive skills to change what they do. There are many different types of itemized packs. You can find Breach and Legion monsters that drop splinters, untainted
video
packs that
broadcast is
provide
cutting some of
insane
them
amounts of experience, and even simple frogs, which can be used to replace difficult monsters to make life easier. And of course, these Ember monsters can be raised as specters too. Finally, let's discuss how this league works in in-game maps.
Wait, we
Each
can
in-game
spectre
map
frogs
will allow
now?
you to manipulate it using the lantern on the map device UI. However, instead of randomly cycling every few minutes, it is fixed to that map. Once you view the map through the lantern, you cannot remove it from the map device, so you can't trade that map away now that you've seen it as too difficult for you, or has monsters in it that you'd rather avoid, like porcupines. We're also trying something new this time around. During the Necropolis League, there will be support for the League on the Atlas passive tree.
Wow.
Multiple clusters will be there, allowing you to
That's
enhance the
interesting.
gameplay, customize it, and even change its behavior in meaningful ways. One way that you can change the crafting in a meaningful way is with the Prospero's Wager Keystone. With this keystone, all the monsters with unresolved anguish come with this crafting modifier, which causes them to generate a random craft when buried. This means instead of pre-planning your crafts, you have to adapt to them on the fly to get the best results. These clusters will not be available in Standard League. In 3.24, we've made a plethora of changes to the engine. We've introducing new bosses, adding another tier of maps, and streamlining the Atlas. The most difficult and most rewarding content in Path of Exile can be found in Uber Pinnacle bosses, such as the Maven and the Searing Exarch. Currently, the only way to access these bosses is by allocating specific keystones on the Atlas passive tree. While this system offers a nice element of control, it causes a problem. Rewards and access to the non-Uber variants are now economically priced around the rewards of the Uber fights. This means it is wasteful to run the non-Uber variants instead of simply selling them.
Finally split.
Another problem that we noticed is the difficulty jump between the Pinnacle and Uber Pinnacle content was relatively large, and there wasn't obvious content that could bridge this gap. Many players would give up on their characters before being able to defeat the Uber Pinnacle bosses. In 3.24, we will be making some changes to this. We are removing the keystones that give access to the Uber Pinnacle bosses from the Atlas tree, and instead we'll be adding a new set of fragments that give you access to this content. Where do you get these fragments? We are adding a new tier of maps, Tier 17 maps, which not only give you access to the Uber Pinnacle content, but also test your characters in new ways. They feature a new set of bosses, Uber monsters, and a new tier of modifiers that can roll on the maps. There are 5 new Tier 17 maps in total, with some surprising boss fights at the end. We'll look at a couple today, and the rest you'll have to discover for yourself. First, we have the Citadel map. This map contains an ancient Kalguran citadel. You will encounter many expedition monsters as the signature packs throughout the map. At the end, you will fight Uber Uhtred. This is a version of a boss from Expedition League,
have
with
Uber
all its
bosses.
abilities and mechanics enhanced. Uber Uhtred will even be able to summon 2 other expedition bosses to aid it during the fight. Secondly, we have the Fortress map. This map is an impregnable fortress, guarded by monsters from the Heist League. At the end, you will encounter an Uber version of the Unbreakable. Again, it has enhanced abilities and mechanics you'll have to learn and overcome. Each of the Tier 17 map bosses has a chance to drop a unique item, allowing for some target farming. However, these aren't entirely new unique items. Instead, we've taken other unique items, removing them from the core drop pool and rebalancing them to fit here. One example is this reworked version of Wraith Lord. It has 4 Abyss sockets,
Oh my god.
and allows you to summon an additional Spectre for each Ghastly Eye Jewel socketed into it. Another example is Mana Storm. This has been rebalanced to grant a lot more damage than before, alongside some more impactful mana stats, if you can get lucky rolls. Alongside adding Tier 17 maps, we have also changed the Uber Pinnacle bosses to have completely distinct unique item drop pools from their non-Uber counterparts. This means there is a reason to farm both versions. Let's take a look at the Shaper versus the Uber Shaper. The Shaper will drop these uniques: Voidwalker, Shaper's Touch, Solstice Vigil, and Dying Sun. Whereas the Uber Shaper will drop these:
They've given them
Echoes
their
of Creation,
own pool.
Sublime
Oh my god.
Vision, Entropic Devastation, Starforge, and a new unique belt called the Tides of Time.
Getting
Another
charges?
example of a new unique is this helmet from
Excuse
the
me?
Uber Eater of Worlds, Ravenous Passion, and these gloves from the Uber Searing Exarch, the Celestial Brace. Each of the Uber Pinnacle bosses has a new
Spell
unique added to
Rage.
their drop pools.
Ooh.
We've identified another major problem with the
Gonna have
endgame
to
we'd
look
like
at all
to
these
address.
uniques after this.
With every expansion added to the game, we have been increasing the complexity of running maps. It's at the point now where a player must repeatedly execute a large sequence of steps to run maps efficiently. It can be easy to forget critical steps, and it can be tiring to repeat them. To solve this, we are removing some systems, but are keeping what is good about them. The 2 main systems we've removed are Sextants and the Master Mission Selector. It is not our intention to dull the content, however. We have completely reworked Scarabs to include most of the options that were previously covered by those mechanics, and many, many more. Let's take a look at some of them. Commonly, you might find Scarabs that simply grant access to different content. Here, we have a Scarab that causes Beyond Demons to spawn when killing monsters in your maps. And here, we have one that adds a Delirium Mirror. Each type of Scarab now has multiple versions, so if you want to fully invest in a type of content, you can do so. Here's a suite of Ultimatum Scarabs. This Ultimatum Scarab adds an Ultimatum encounter to a map. This Ultimatum Scarab of Bribing then causes that Ultimatum encounter to grant better rewards and its monsters to yield more experience. This Ultimatum Scarab of Dueling will cause that Ultimatum encounter to always guarantee the Trial Master boss fight at the end, assuming you can survive through all the rounds. This Ultimatum Scarab of Catalyzing will cause all rewards from that ultimatum to be catalysts, instead of other rewards. And finally, this Ultimatum Scarab of Inscription will cause all catalyst rewards from that ultimatum to be inscribed ultimatums instead. There are plenty
Jesus,
of others.
that's crazy.
If you enjoy divination card farming, you might want to use these. This Divination Scarab of Curation causes more divination cards to drop for each different favored map you have selected. But it also causes whatever map you're running to only drop divination cards from those favored maps. So if you want to try and aim for your Mage Blood and don't want to just farm Crimson Temple, then this Scarab is for you. This Divination Scarab of Completion causes your Divination cards to have a 20% chance to drop as a full stack instead, for maximum dopamine. Basically, there are now just a lot of Scarabs. You might have also noticed that they no longer have tiers. Scarabs are now all world drops. You can get them anywhere. Some might be rarer than others, but the intention is that there'll be a lot more options than before, and more interesting combinations to consider. If you want to target specific Scarabs, Betrayal has been updated to include most of them, and you will need to relearn which ones come from where. While this system is allowing you to heavily invest in one type of content, it is reducing your capacity for variety.
This seems so good.
To address this, we have massively increased access to content on the Atlas passive tree.
Oh, hell yeah.
You are now able to reliably get different leagues like Breach or Legion from just your Atlas passives.
Huge.
Regarding master missions, content such as Incursion, Delve, Betrayal, and Bestiary, these too are now accessible with Scarabs, and have more reliable investment options on the tree. Not only this, you can now get Jun, Einhar, Alva, and Nico to appear together in the same map.
So good.
We have also removed some keystones such as Wandering Path, Grand Design, and Growing Hordes, but have added some new ones too. For example, Unwavering Vision, Back to Basics, and Thorough Exploration. And we have added some new notables such as Remarkable Relics, which allows you to try find better variants of Scarabs. Mounting Modifiers, which increases the values of modifiers on your maps by 2% for each explicit modifier. And Tainted Carapaces, which is just one in a set of many that allow you to target farm specific types of Scarabs. These are just a few of the many new notables that can be found on the Atlas passive skill tree. Lastly, we are giving you more flexibility in what content you want to run in the endgame. In 3.24, you can now have multiple copies of the Atlas tree, which can be swapped between maps at your leisure. You can unlock up to 2 extra trees for a total of 3 by progressing through the endgame and completing core content. When you open a map, you can select which tree you would like to use. For a given league, you'll never feel constrained to playing your endgame a single way. You can also label your trees to easily identify which one has which content. With all this combined, we're hoping to see new endgame strategies shine through. While playing through the campaign in 3.24, you'll notice a myriad of small improvements and surprises. The fundamentals of the campaign are still intact, but we've scattered fun encounters and secrets throughout Rayclast. The Dweller of the Deep has been trapped.
Oh, yes.
What are these ritual shrines doing in the northern forest? And why are they giving me omens? This device looks safe. I should definitely use this on my items. There are plenty more encounters to discover. We'll continue adding more surprises in future releases, so keep an eye out. In the previous expansion, 3.23, we released a large number of transfigured skill gems. These are alternate versions of existing skill gems that function in very different ways, allowing for more build and gameplay variety. At the time, our aspirations were higher than we could achieve. We planned more gems than we could make. So, in 3.24, we're adding another set of transfigured gems that we have now finished. Ice Shot, Incinerate, Artillery Ballista, Tornado, Elemental Hit, Kinetic Blast, Poisonous Concoction, and lastly, Summon Holy Relic. Hopefully those of you who missed your favorite skill having a transfigured variant will get that here. We will certainly be adding more of these in the future, especially for skills that are missing them still. Of course, we'll also be doing a balance pass on the existing transfigured gems. One of the main ones we're looking at is Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation. As a result of this change, it is clear that the endgame potential of the Wander archetype really starts to suffer, mostly in the single target damage department. Due to this, we've added the new support gem, Sacred Wisps. This support gem causes supported skills to create 2 attached wisps for a duration. With these wisps, whenever you attack, they have a chance to also use the same skill, if you have enemies in your presence, and if there are any rare or unique enemies, they will always use the skill. That leads us into all the other quality of life features we're introducing in 3.24, and there's a shitload of them. Many of these have been revealed in teasers already, but here's a quick summary. We've added the automation and call to arms skill gems, for being able to trigger instant skills and war cries without having to bind them to left click. You can now hold down Control and left click to automatically apply certain currency orbs until they achieve the desired result, or you run out. For example, you can hold down fusings until you reach maximum links. You will be able to control, shift, click currency into a trade window to automatically move all of that currency at once from your inventory. Detonate Dead now has clearer telegraphing effects. When harvest crafting, the item hover will always be visible, so you no longer have to mouse back and forth to see the results of your crafts. When you use a Val orb on a map, the map no longer has a chance to become unidentified. Instead, it adds a new implicit. We've created a set of implicits that affect the areas in fun ways. Related to that, corrupted and mirrored items can now be identified. Breach hands now open upon approach, and no longer need to be clicked. Upgrades to Pantheon powers now apply to all characters in a league. You no longer need to grind divine vessels on each new character. With harvest crafting, you can now re-roll Uber Elder fragments. Fragments dropped by the Shaper cannot be re-rolled into fragments dropped by the Elder, and vice versa. Regarding Betrayal, we're removing Ashling's crafting bench as a reward. Instead, Veiled Orbs now perform that function. They remove a mod and replace it with a Veiled mod. These orbs now drop from Katarina and are no longer a world drop. Flasks can now be corrupted by Val Orbs, giving random -10 to +10 quality. The capability to add extra quality to weapons, armors, and flasks has been removed from Betrayal. The Betrayal bench craft that converts an amulet to a talisman has been moved to Bestiary, and thus can be traded. Maven invitations no longer drop. Instead, when you have completed witnessing all bosses required to go to the Maven's arena, you can just talk to Kirak, and he'll open a map device window with the invitation already in there, ready to be rolled. Valdo's maps that granted invitations now give scarabs. No more having to waste Guardian kills to try get invitations to drop. Next up, we're going to be talking about our new League supporter packs. Today, we're launching 2 new series of supporter packs, the Solar and Eldritch packs. Each tier contains the full pack's face value and points, alongside several exclusive microtransactions. These packs are only available for the duration of the Necropolis League, and will leave the store forever when it ends. As always, the microtransactions in these packs are purely cosmetic, and do not affect your character's power or progression in any way. The Solar series of supporter packs contains 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Cosmos weapon effect adorns your weapon with stars. Hitting enemies causes cosmic energy to spill out into the area around them. The Radiant Orb of Chance extra effect projects the outcome of items you've used an Orb of Chance on above your head. Remember to congratulate other exiles in town if you see them chance a powerful unique item. Shine boldly with the Solar Knight armor set. The power of the sun radiates from your body, getting more and more intense as you use skills and emitting solar flares as you run. With the Supernova level up extra effect, the dead will be raised from the ground around you, before being obliterated and turned to ash by an epic supernova whenever you level up. This one is my personal favorite. The Cosmic Turtle Hideout lets you travel the infinite expanse of the cosmos atop the back of a colossal turtle. Carry the weight of the sun on your back with the Solar Guardian back attachment. Witness it grow larger and larger as the energy of slain enemies is funneled into it. When it reaches its maximum size, it goes supernova and turns into a black hole, forever drifting throughout Rayclast. The Eldritch Pack series also has 6 exclusive microtransactions. Are you wondering if we moved the stash in the latest patch? Don't be fooled, because with the Mimic Stash Pet, players can transform into an image of a stash when in a town or hideout and scare unsuspecting exiles. This pet follows behind you with its terrifying hand-walking the rest of the time. The Shaper's Slam finisher effect sends slain unique enemies into a
Final abyss of unending darkness.
The Eldritch Hunger armor set contains a beast that demands you defeat it by embracing your bloodlust. Watch it grow in power the more you kill until it bursts from the shell of the helmet. Are you able to satiate its hunger? The seed within the Corrupted Growth map device expands its grasp on your hideout, the more maps you complete on your atlas. Equipping the Headhunter character effect causes skulls of slain rare enemies to whirl around you like trophies. They become enraged when you are near a rare enemy you are yet to kill, wishing for them to join your collection. Witness a reality where the struggle didn't exist, allowing the Eldritch Horrors to settle their own conflicts with the Eldritch Horror Apparition effect. Which of the Eater of Worlds or Searing Exarch do you think will win? These packs are now available for purchase on both PC and console, and will remain so during Path of Exile Necropolis. Meanwhile, the Shade and Disciple packs leave the store forever at the launch of Necropolis League, so now's your last chance to purchase them. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. We're just about to start the Q&A with Ziggy D. Afterwards, we'll post Path of Exile Necropolis' full patch notes. With release at the end of next week, our community team will be posting crucial information you'll need for Necropolis' release. Keep an eye on the news. On release weekend, we expect to launch the new Mystery Box and this season's Kerax Vault Pass. Thank you for joining us today and checking out our latest developments. We're looking forward to doing some awesome Gravecrafts and conquering the new endgame bosses with you next week. We'll begin the Q&A shortly, so please get your questions ready.
While we wait for the Q&A to start. Lantern of Aramor. 400% quant, Jesus. I like it. Wait, armor items do not help.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games.
What?
Good morning, Exiles, and welcome to our Q&A portion for today. I'm joined by Jonathan and Mark, and first thing, we're going to be talking about Path of Exile.
Oh, hello. No! Refresh! What's going on? Come back! Twitch, did you die? Ah! Hello? Where did you go, Twitch? Path of Exile, where the fuck? Yeah.
Especially since they like characters that are actively present elsewhere in the game in another mechanic right now. Like, what does that mean?
We bent the rules a little bit on that teaser. They're not actually involved. They're only in the sense that they are both T17 map bosses, so you don't actually fight them together, but we thought it would make a cool, little teaser shot there, and I think it did. It raised a lot of questions, so yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay. I was like, we're just doing some timey-wimey stuff. Oh, they both kind of like deal with death, so there's a bit of a connection there.
Like when you get into maps, everything's all memories and the line gets a bit blurred. You can kind of do whatever you want, which is a good thing about that system. You don't have to stay so grounded and sensible. But so yeah, we do have some interesting encounters going on there that are a bit different. But it's again, the maps allow us to kind of detach from the groundedness of the world and the rules of what's actually happening in there.
It looks like there's a lot of boss stuff coming this league. Is that all focused in the new T17 maps, or is there some with the league mechanic itself as well?
No, we focused the monster development this time around on the T17s instead of the league. So there's no new bosses in the league, but there are some reuse of monsters through like the Allflame Embers and whatnot, but not bosses. And then, we put all our boss development towards creating these T17 bosses, as well as the monsters. Like there are quite a lot of actual interesting monsters in the T17 maps as well. Like I don't know if people saw, but you can get Brutus as just a monster. Like he's not a boss. He's just there are packs of Brutuses and
Packs of Brutus.
various
Hi, I
other
believe.
monsters throughout like the non-notable ones, which will be quite interesting to see. You'll probably find a rare hasted Brutus is a whole different level compared to even the Brutus map boss and whatnot. So.
Yes, we experienced that last league in Affliction at launch. For those of us there who empowered that boss, that was an experience to be sure. So we'll kind of change my order of the day then with the tier 17 maps. So there's 4 of these, was there?
We've got 5 of them.
5.
Yeah, we've got the Ziggurat map, Sanctuary map, Fortress map, Abomination map, and Citadel map being the 5.
And these are like effectively Uber maps, but we kind of also had Uber maps last league in a different way with the community made maps as well. But this is a whole different system, right?
Yeah, this is different. Obviously the Valdo's maps come with a little bit more craziness going on. There are custom mod pools on these. And there is a little bit of overlap, but nowhere near as crazy. Like you're not going to roll the like mod that sends you to the Void League or anything like that. That's exclusive for those player-made ones. But yes, this is a new tier of difficulty. It is expected that they are hard for sure, but I'm sure some of your questions get into some of that. So
yeah,
I'll explain them as it comes.
So these are the primary vehicle now for getting like the Uber fight keys. What led to the decision to make them come from a tier 17 separate map thing like this instead of from the boss, which I guess was the more expected, like you would get an Uber Maven key from Maven?
Like, okay, like let's say it was from Shaper, and to get Uber Shaper, and you kill your Shaper, let's say it was even once every time, and now you kill your Uber Shaper, or let's say you fail, that's fine, but eventually you conquer it, you can kill it. It's not now fun to go back and do regular Shaper where clearly you can do the Uber version. Why are you bothering with the non-Uber version? So unless you want a specific drop from him, it's not fun to go back and just do like a clearly lower grade quality. So we instead went with it going a different way where we have something that is ideally in between those 2 points of difficulty and has random variance. Like you'll find that some of the tier 17 map bosses with certain mod combinations are probably even harder than the Uber Pinnacles, depending on your character and all of those variables there. I wouldn't say that's going to happen entirely consistently, like it'll be occasionally the case, but it certainly isn't fun to just be like, in order to do Uber Shaper, I have to do this content that I have clearly proven capable of doing and just repeating that over and over.
I see, yeah. So it's for the people who want to farm their own ones. They're doing content that is up to their challenge level, basically, because the regular boss wouldn't be anywhere near that.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Right on. How do you get the tier 17 maps, though?
So the tier 17 maps, when you get more Void Stones, it has a chance to convert T16 maps that drop. The more Void Stones you get, it becomes multiplicatively higher. But there is a kind of diminishing returns on that. So it is quite probable to convert T16 maps like the first one, and then as you get more T17s, it becomes less and less and less. And the reason we did that is obviously the discrepancy between just running regular T16s and obviously top tier juicing, you end up with like, the multiplier difference of the amount of T16s dropping is substantial to say the least. And we didn't want it to be that we have to balance around the juicing with respect to getting T17s. We wanted to be that more accessible across the board. And so, yes, we added a kind of diminishing return. So like your first one might be quite probable, the next one's less, and the next one less. And then you're not going to get like, 20 T17s in one map kind of thing going on. Right. It is also worth noting T17s cannot drop T17s. They are not self-sustaining. The intention is that you are still kind of doing T16s and occasionally diving into T17s. Unless you want to trade, of course, in which case, the world's your oyster.
So I saw they have their own new mod pool. And we saw things, one of the mods I saw was Rare Monsters remove 10% life, mana, and ES on hit. The mana removed on hit seems to break a lot of builds in particular whenever that sort of thing comes up, as mana is generally a pretty finely tuned system in Path of Exile. And it gets me thinking in general about mods like 80% reduced recovery and things that disable auras and stuff like that. And it feels just a bit not too dissimilar to monsters just being immune to your build, right? So what's the intention behind those sorts of modifiers in maps?
It certainly was the ideal dream back when, that there are a lot of modifiers that can't be done by every build and you'd re-roll them and whatnot. Now, obviously, in the context of T17s, you can't re-roll them. So this really is, you should either change your playstyle, take your time, be a bit more careful to do it, or you can trade it away, of course, or maybe you simply can't run it on that character and you have to maybe build a different character that is capable of doing, or more characters that are capable of doing different maps. There is one tool, though, that is in the form of a scarab. One of the scarabs gives you additional crafting modifiers on your map device. It isn't a common scarab by any means. You can't just use it on every T17. But two of the extra crafting mods that get applied to the map device is that prefixes are disabled and suffixes are disabled. So you can pick one of those. So if you do get one of these T17s, I do expect sometimes, and you're like, I can't run it because of this modifier, you can at least use that scarab to turn that off occasionally. So it is like one of the tools that you can use to get around certain mods that it might be too hard or you can't quite get through. But the general idea is that you do have to actually think about these modifiers, play around them, change your characters. It's not just a kind of like, well, you don't have to alch them, they drop rolled, but it shouldn't just be a T17 is mindless, go in there and do it. Unless, of course, your build is so strong and so diverse that it can do that, which that's fine. If you want to build your character that way, then that's what the game allows you to do, and that's what we like. So,
right on. We'll jump back to the league a little bit before we move on to some of the other endgame questions that I have. But what you're doing with the difficulty control for Necropolis, where you can select which monsters get buffed in which ways, seems like a lot of what people have been asking for, especially with Afflictions launch, where we didn't have as precise control over the difficulty of content we were facing. That said, how do you weigh up giving this level of control against things like adding to the time it takes to jump into the gameplay? I saw that this is going to take a bit of time to like read through those things and shuffle the menu each zone.
So obviously we like giving control. But yes, in this league, you cannot skip the difficulty. Having the control is a way to make it easier or harder if you want. But you cannot skip it. If you just enter the area and you don't interact with the lantern, you'll get whatever randomly generates. So you don't have to, I'd say throughout the campaign, like it is going to be harder by not engaging with it, but you don't have to engage with the league in the sense of interacting with that UI. But you will have to deal with the fact that some monsters are harder. So this is a rare league where in this case, you can't really skip it, which isn't something we do a lot. But occasionally we get back into that and try it out. Now, that being said, yes, obviously we like difficulty, being able to manipulate the difficulty. And I think it is, and obviously the rewards as well. Now, it just needs to be the case that it is worth your time from a reward standpoint, engaging with that. If that isn't the case, we have failed. Like, it obviously should be worth your time from a reward point to go, oh, awesome, I got this thing, I need to put it on some XP, I need to put it on this pack, or you get like, the pack spawns Torment Spirits on death, I need to make sure it's on this pack. Like, there are certainly lots of positive mods that, or like spawning lesser shrines, right? If you put that on a very rare pack, you're not going to get very many of them. If you put it on a common pack, all of a sudden you're going to have a whole bunch of shrine buffs throughout the area, which in turn also makes it easier. So not only does this league make it harder, it also makes it easier in some ways. Now, one thing you said, talking about the time, like obviously when you get to endgame, which like for every map, you do get presented with that UI, but because we have added the nodes on the Atlas tree for Necropolis, we have added a keystone that allows you to, well, effectively what it says is the mods are applied randomly and there are more mods, so it is harder and it is more rewarding in some senses, but you then don't get to customize it. But if someone is like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with interacting with that between my maps, you can just run the map and it will randomly do it. And like, that isn't necessarily to say that that's better or worse. It's just one of the ways someone can customize their experience here. But yeah, so through the campaign, you don't have to use the UI, but it will probably be harder and less rewarding. So you should be wanting to do it, unless, of course, you just want to get to endgame, go for it. And at endgame, if you want to invest in the keystone, you can skip doing it on the maps themselves if you, again, don't want to have to deal with it. So ideally, we've given, the choice here to do both versions and play the way you want to play.
I think that's really clever, using the Atlas passive tree as like a tool to be able to customize that league experience. Now I'm to the point that I'm surprised it hasn't happened before, right? But it makes sense.
It was actually, we were talking about trying to find a way, and we were talking about like check boxes and all that, and it's all just a little bit inelegant, and It was actually a suggestion of one of the programmers was like, we could do a keystone. And then we're like, hey, we never actually do tree support for the current league. Like, it's just not even a thing that we've really considered. And from there, we're like, wait, we should just do this. Like, of course we should do this. Like, this is going to be fun and allow people to do different strategies, and like, why not? So I think it is a good addition. We'll see how it actually plays, because it's the first time we're doing it, and then we may continue doing it for future leagues, or maybe it's terrible. We'll see, and we'll not do it again. Well, who knows? I mean, we think it's cool here, but we're not always right.
All right. So in the campaign, the monsters you kill in one zone affect what happens in the next zone, like the amount of devoted monsters, modifiers that show up. And this is the first time I recall seeing a league like this where what you do in one affects like kind of the next zone like that. Does it work on like any next zone you enter, even like a zone reset of the same zone or somewhere in a different act or something?
No. So this doesn't. The league actually isn't customizable when accessing through Waypoint or through the world map.
Oh.
Which is bit different. I mean, you might think, but my Blood Aqueduct farming, and yeah, sure, you can still do it technically by farming from town, but we're also like, not that I know how many people even still do that outside of like, SSF tabular farming, which I still don't even know if necessarily is a strategy. But either way, yes, farming the same zone over and over is not really embraced in this league. The difficulty will still be there, but you won't be able to customize the mods, and you won't get devoted mods either. So it's more for like, the linear playthrough when you're going through. So
Souls
the way it
quarry.
works, the way it works effectively is like the more haunted monsters you kill, the more likely you will get devoted modifiers. It's a campaign-only feature. It doesn't happen in maps. Maps are completely randomly generated per item. So it's an interesting way where it works a little bit differently in the campaign than maps, which I think is interesting. I kind of like having subtle differences there. And yeah, the more haunted monsters you kill, the more likely you are to get devoted monsters. And this is actually a reward for why you want to make it hard. Because let's just using Mudflats as the example, if you put all the if you have, say, 2 out of 4 of the packs, or however many packs there are, have haunted mods, you might want to say, I'm going to make that easier and put them on the zombies and water elementals. But those are the least common monsters in that area, and thus you are less likely to now get devoted modifiers to appear when transitioning into either Fetid Pool or Submerged Passage. So you actually have an incentive to put them on the rowers and the other pack of rowers, because they are like the dominant monster in that area. Which is kind of interesting. So again, like there are many pros and cons to controlling the difficulty and rewards. And then when you click the next, when you next peer through the lantern, it'll like show which mods you got. And yeah, hopefully you get as many good ones as you can. But also the other thing, just while we're on that topic, of the other reason why it's actually sometimes good to make things harder, in some sense, there's so many axes here that it's more like you want as many monsters as possible haunted by as many high tier things as possible, is that the haunted monsters are the ones that can turn into the ones that you collect for crafting. So again, if you want to maximize your crafting output, you want to be putting the haunted modifiers of the highest tiers on the packs that have the highest density and pack size. So again, going into Mudflats as the example, you want to have the rowers do that if you want to maximize your crafting output. So there are 2 axes and rewards for why you want to be making things harder. But often what I would say people are probably going to be like, I'm going to make things a bit easier to start with, and they get more comfortable with their character. As their character gets more powerful, they start to take a little bit more risks in that regard. And of course, if it becomes too hard and they over make it too hard for themselves, the mods rotate pretty frequently, like to the point of you like running through an area. The next time if you then had to recreate that area, because you're like, nah, I've made it too hard. The mods will have rotated, and you can adapt your decisions and be like, yeah, this is easier for me now. I'll wait a few more areas or some more levels until I then raise the difficulty again.
So how clearly is that like reward system communicated in the UI? Can like someone who hasn't like watched this know that, killing more of these monsters will give more devoted to the next zone and stuff like that?
That isn't currently communicated, but it will be. You probably didn't see it in the live stream, but we will do that. At least on the hovers, when you hover over and it just says devoted, we will put like a little, we'll put it on the hovers of all the like tier things where it says like servant haunted, noble haunted, etc. Currently, I think it says something, but I can't remember what. But yeah, we'll do a pass on making things more observable and all of that.
It's actually kind of interesting on that point that this is the first time in PoE where you have information about what is in a zone and what the pack compositions are, and like just information about monsters. And there's just information generally there about like what monsters do and so on, which is kind of not really something we've ever really done before. So this UI actually sort of provides that, and it'll be interesting to see like whether that's actually useful and like whether we want to think about how we might communicate that again in the future, because like all that's now sort of a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I got really excited actually when I saw that. I was like, oh, we can actually see what their abilities are and damage types and stuff like that. I was like,
there's along that note, there's quite an interesting feature in maps that because maps have uniform density distribution of packs. So generally in a map you're going to have like I think it's 5 packs or whatever, and you're going to have 20. It's generally going to be that there's 20% of the map as each pack. So in maps, there are these extra little symbols, which I don't think were in the live stream that we've kind of added in more recently, which are variants. So sometimes a certain pack is going to have higher like pack size or mod effect or density, and there'll be these kind of up and down arrows to kind of show like this pack's going to be more common and this one's going to be less common and stuff like that, just to add that variance so that those variables can still play a role in when interacting with the modifiers. Otherwise, it would just be like, here's porcupines, I'll do X, and then 90% of packs you probably wouldn't care too much about. So we've added extra variables to make it that the packs and maps, are a bit, have more influence on your decisions. That being said, when you get into tier 17 and you all have a pack of Brutuses, you might actually think a bit more about it. Yeah.
You talking about your up and down arrows there made me realize what the next league is going to be. Monster stock market investing. It's there. It's ready for you.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go off topic a little bit here and answer a chanted question in chat so that we can get back on track. So one sec. There we go. So you've been flooding us with a lot of great quality of life updates in the lead up to this release. It's like some spring cleaning is going on right now, which I love to see. That said, at least one of them seems to have missed the mark, which is the automation change and the resulting removal of the ability to bind instant skills to left click movement. So having your steel skin on left click and having an auto cast that way. So this seems to be a pretty unpopular change. And I just want to ask you guys, why do you feel like that is? Why is it so unpopular?
Well, there's I'll go into a few things here, but yes, obviously missed the mark on this one. As I said, we're not always right. Bit of a disaster. I do, however, think this is solving some good things the way we've done it, but the problem is it hasn't obviously solved it entirely, and going from a bad solution to a bad solution, at least from our perspective, is not what we should be doing. So we will make further changes. I just don't know exactly when and to what degree. There's obviously discussions going on. So to get into some details there, I do believe that it is beneficial now that it is a more observable mechanic, a less like hidden specialized mechanic of, like you can follow a build guide and you can see, oh, this person's using this instant skill. But at no point does a user necessarily know they should randomly, unintuitively bind it to left click to have it auto cast.
The way that was before was just, I think, like more than anything, it just felt like such a strange, like, why should this even be a thing? Kind of, it was kind of almost exploiting a quirk in just the way that our input system was, rather than really being like an actual mechanic we decided to exist. I think that was probably where we started to feel like, oh, this is like. Because I remember when I was discussing with Mark, and I was kind of like, this really, like, if you tell a new user about this thing and the way that it works and why it is the way that it is, it's kind of like, this just sounds so dumb. And that's kind of why we were kind of sort of keen to change it. But on the other hand, I guess the problem, well, yeah, I mean, ultimately the issue there is that, the solution is a reduction in character power due to the fact that you need to have an extra support socket. And, without compensation, that obviously feels really bad. So,
I do stand by the, like, being able to have it trigger while stationary is an advantage, and being able to use multiple is an advantage. But of course, then we talk about more into socket pressure, right? Using multiple, unless you were already using multiple, isn't reasonable for most characters. So, and we can talk about all kinds of like what the actual solutions would be, but effectively, from my perspective, I come down to if these things are just becoming passive skills, then why are they not just passive skills? That's what I've kind of come to recently. Like, we should probably take all of these, make them like, how is, say, Time of Need not different from Steel Skin? I understand one of them is regeneration and one of them is mitigation, but in the sense that, like, effectively what we're saying, Steel Skin, Molten Shell, etc., is now every 10 seconds do something for Y seconds, which is exactly what a lot of our passives do. And so I was just thinking, like, we could move a lot of these into passives. And then what we could do is actually take what we originally intended for those skills and design awesome skills that are, because they were intended to be reactionary. And it'd be nice to actually design some stuff that is useful for that. Now, obviously, that's a longer discussion, designing the specifics of all the skills. But there are also some objective problems and balance problems that did happen from this outside of socket pressure. And I can at least cover some of them now. So I'll start with, General's Cry. Obviously nerfed by this, right? It isn't nerfed if you were to use it manually. It is nerfed automated. And when you look at it, no one's using it manually. Everyone's using it automated. And when I say everyone, I obviously mean, the majority of people. So we are buffing General's Cry, and we are doing some other things Warcry adjacent, like I think there's some inconsistencies on a bunch of unique items which have like casting a Warcry and using a Warcry, and we're making that more consistent so that more things work in that regard, but there's heaps of little nitty-gritty details there. Patch notes will hopefully clarify all that. Now, then there's mines, which is a big one. Now, mine playstyle, aside from the annoying having it on left click, going like tink, 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 tink the whole time, and that just being irritating, it is certainly the case that when it is triggering all the time with a support gem, obviously, if you now want to have the play style of throwing heaps of mines and then moving to detonate them all at once, which is how mines are meant to be played. You could do that before, and now you can't. So to change that, we've added a mastery for mines, which does the exact same behavior as before, which the mastery says your mines will detonate every X milliseconds while moving, and it will occur the moment you start moving from a stationary position. Now, the other third one I'll get into here is, Bone Armor from Necromancer. So, goodbye Bone Armor. And we have redesigned some of the nodes around there. So, what have we changed? I'll see if I can remember all the details here. I think it's Mindless Aggression. All these notables are going to probably get renamed due to the theme change, but I'll use the old names just because that's what everyone will know. So Mindless Aggression is now multiplicative 10% more minion damage and multiplicative 20% more minion life instead of the increased damage and increased speed. This is possibly worse as a 2-pointer at like level 30, but in-game far, far, far superior in terms of actual damage output. You could argue it's slightly worse with Spiritual Aid, but I think that loss is ultimately inconsequential with the other changes here. Then there's the 4-pointer Bone Barrier, which we are going to keep the PDR stat and the what we're doing is we're removing Bone Armor and we're adding a large amount of minion life is added as extra energy shield, which will increase the minion survivability for the amount lost by Bone Armor. So that should provide a good mitigation against, obviously with the mechanic of energy shield recharging, it'll help a lot towards your minions. Like, they take a bit of hit of damage and then they have some time to get it back. And, it's not foolproof, but that's fine. What you have lost is obviously the bleed removal from them. Deal with it is my answer on that one. What we actually did find, by the way, is a lot of Necromancers weren't actually using Bone Armor, and a lot were just using Molten Shell anyway. So I don't know how much of that is actually lost. And I know this is a bit of a rant, but I'll just keep going because, again, people want to know about these changes. What else did we change there?
One more thing. Did you change the leech thing, or is that...
Yeah, so there is a... I don't want to misremember exactly. I'll go into the Unholy Might thing first. So Unholy Might, we're actually changing what Unholy Might does, which is better for summoners in some regards, but more so poison summoners, and better for everyone else in many regards. So Unholy Might now is 100% of physical converted to chaos, as well as I think it's 25% chance to apply Wither on hit. So hopefully that is enabling a lot more different unique items, and obviously Sin's Rebirth and all of that throughout the game. But also poison summoners, in theory, don't also now have to use a Wither setup, and so they get some gems there, I suppose. But that's not exactly necessarily going to be a meta build. But we have changed Extractor Mentis because that gave permanent Unholy Might to monsters, and that means that with CI now you will have a physical and chaos immunity against monsters, and that was a little bit busted with Worm Flask shenanigans. So anyway, that's been adjusted, and I can't remember. We were experimenting with some leech. I can't remember if we stuck with it, but I think we had a 1% of damage dealt by minions is leached to you as life, replacing the recovery on Bone Barrier as well, which should account for a lot more incoming life recovery. I will double check that and I will post that afterwards just in case, because we went through like 50 iterations here and we're at somewhere. So that leaves one major problem, which is the socket pressure, especially on summoners. And we are actively discussing solutions to that one. I think where we are currently landing is that we want to have corruption implicits possibly on all the different minion base types. So Bone Ring, the Bone Shields, and the minion weapons, which grant various different skills like Convocation, the Offerings, Desecrate. I know a lot of people end up just auto-casting Desecrate and Offerings with the wand, but for people who don't have that's good. And at the very least, generally Convocation is unlinked. We might even do the Golem skills as corruptions too. I'm a bit iffy on that one, so I know generally I shouldn't say things that we're not definitely doing, but I'm just speaking freely on that one. So hopefully that is at least a temporary solution to alleviate some socket pressure, but we probably do need to do more. But doing more in the next week is, probably kind of hard. So I would look forward to hopefully seeing more of that in the future. But that's where we're at with that pretty much. Big rant.
It's like this automation change kind of revealed just how much of a very potent band-aid the left-click automation was, because it's opened up this whole can of worms of being like, well, it's exposed how these skills designs are all a bit problematic. These ones that encourage you to have them just up all the time, cast off cooldown. These are things that potentially need to be readdressed, right?
For sure. This does happen a lot. Even if you look at the Pantheon change, which was one of the first quality of life things we announced, it's like, well, we're going to change this Pantheon thing. Surely that's good for everyone, not having to redo. And then all of a sudden it's like, but now I don't want to always have chill effect on and all this. And we're just looking at these things going, Pantheons equals positive buffs. But then there are all these niche builds and Johnny builds that end up with taking these upsides and turning them into, they become downsides. And so now we have to adapt another thing. Often what happens is we change a system that we entirely think is positive. And yes, either because we've not given it enough time internally, or because, again, it's very hard for even 100 people to find things as quickly and as actively as the many hundreds of thousands of people. And so, we find that there are things we then need to do afterwards to fix. So obviously, we address the Pantheon thing by allowing you on a character-by-character basis to then disable and enable Pantheon upgrades to fix a bunch of niche builds. But with a game as expansive as Path of Exile, with all the millions of different builds, it is pretty hard to change anything without affecting something. And in this case, it was just we made a change that affected a lot more than we had originally thought about. And we're doing a lot of solutions here, but there is certainly need for a much grander solution when it comes to that left click thing. But I think where we're at right now is probably pretty good. I am never ever going to be happy with the fact anyone feels like they need to do some sort of numlock shenanigans, or whatever the crazy strategies are. That is not okay. And as such, we need to, if that is still happening, we need to still fix more.
Yeah. Yeah. When there's one of these things where you change something and it's like, this will be good once we get these other things implemented down the line, Do you feel compelled to maybe like hold off on the change until you can get it all done at once?
Well, I think sometimes, but I think in this case, I think I think the lesser evil has been met, and
Yeah.
I think that it is worth sticking to this one, especially with us fixing all those actual objective problems with the balance and actual nerfs that occurred as a result of it. Sure, not every single use case is covered, but I think the other ones are nowhere near as consequential, and I do think it will actually play relatively well. But yeah, in some cases, yeah, I'm sitting there like, okay, do we revert that or do we, aim to get all the fixes in? We're generally pretty fast with reacting to things like this. We generally can make changes pretty quickly. But yeah, it is a hard decision to make for sure. Like you definitely lose sleep over that one. But like that's what we do. And often as like it's actually responding to this one has actually been fun in at least a development sense because it is promoting a bunch of these other changes that have been like honestly needed for a while.
Yeah.
Like especially when it comes to the socket pressure thing, like it is honestly unacceptable that we have not really addressed that in quite some time. So yeah, I mean, ideally, I can't promise by the end of next week we have the right answer, and I can't promise we're necessarily going to do something, but it is certainly something we are actively going to discuss. We have been actively discussing, and will continue actively discussing the moment this live stream is finished.
Yeah, like I said, it was such an effective band-aid that like ripping it off now has like allowed you to kind of get to the meat of some of these problems, which I'm excited to see what you do with these like skills that are all have this design where they were just chucked on left click, because hopefully we get some much more interesting skills out of it down the line as a result.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, already I have a lot of cool ideas. It's just a matter of now finding the resources to get them all in and whatnot.
Good luck. So since we're on the quality of life topic, something that bugged me quite a bit lately is getting attacked while talking to NPCs, especially in Affliction. I didn't end up getting through all the lore because I'm constantly getting attacked. But in the preview footage, I even noticed, I don't know if you ended up using a different version, but the player had the issue of talking to the nameless seer and getting attacked by a mob. Have you guys considered using pause tech to pause the game during NPC conversations when you're otherwise defenseless, or maybe other solutions like making you untargetable during dialogue?
I would say yes, at least in the especially in the context of PoE 2, which does have pausing.
Is there any actual reason we can't add pausing to PoE 1?
Oh, he's doing it again.
Probably not.
Like, I know it's kind of been one of those things that we've, sorry. It's one of those things that like we kind of did, and then we're like, well, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Reese and find out what limitations there were. We certainly were scared by it when we first added it. It was like, this is going to break so much shit, but then it didn't really in PoE 2, so maybe it will.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I can't see any obvious reason why it wouldn't be able to be ported over. Relative, you never know. There'll be something, but it's probably something we can work around.
Right.
I mean,
the thing that does suck a little bit about pausing during NPC conversations, though, is that there's various triggers that occur, and so it won't. If we just enabled it like that, like it would break stuff like the Fairgraves quest, and like things like that. Like there are some things that would break if we did that immediately, but like it's the kind of thing
we would have to find a way to be able to pause, or like opt into pausing on some and not on others.
There's also the question of other people in the zone, as well. Like there's like a ton of random things that would probably.
The way our pausing works right now is everyone has to have opted into a pause for it to be paused. So, but I mean, technically in multiplayer, if you're in proximity like that, you can just be like, defend me to your friend, I suppose. But they might just run off and start trying to loot some stuff and leave you to die. But yeah, I guess the counter argument is like, what about things like having safe zones around NPCs? And I would say that I have yet to find many games that don't end up just having exploitative cases around that. And that would be a lot more actual work,
What about the untargetable buff on the player while you're talking to the NPC?
But it's the whole like I'm in a map and Alva's there and like, oh no, I'm gonna die or something, or like I just want to reprieve and I just go and like click Alva and then I'm like, oh phew, I'm safe now, and then I get
in a world where people can log out. How is that like problematic?
I mean, you're not wrong, but it feels like, well, at least logging out has a cost to the portal, right? Like, I mean, it isn't quite the same. But in the sense that, like, it feels exploitative, whereas logging out does not. Like, it feels like I'm cheesing some mechanic that's unintended for that. Like, I wouldn't want to do a solution that again feels like some sort of...
I counter argue that comment because I think
logging out feels exploitative.
Whereas
I know
if
you're
you're
talking to an
mean.
NPC who protects you with a bubble because they have NPC magic, I'm like, that seems like an in-game thing. Like, that seems reasonable.
I buy that, but also logging out in PoE 2, of course, will log you right back into where you
like,
were.
be careful now because you're going to get us talking into changing how logout works now.
Yep.
I have to say, after the hands-on with PoE 2, I love the pausing and the reconnecting you exactly where you were when if the game crashes or something. So
yeah. Which was turned out to be very beneficial during the test we just did, considering the number of crashes there still were in the build. But
it happens.
at least you could log back into exactly where you were and just continue.
It certainly helped.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Something
there will be a solution to your problem, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And pausing might be one of them. And otherwise, we'll engineer and come up with design some other solution. Like, there will be something. But yes, it has come up quite a bit recently just because of the scope of PoE 2. And generally, when we're discussing that stuff, we do also think, well, if this is a problem in PoE 1 as well, like, what are we doing? Like, let's fix it. So it'll happen at some point.
Sweet. Before we go back to the league, we'll talk about the other kind of quality of life related thing, which was the announcement of the Ashling crafting change. So we've been wanting itemized Ashling crafts for quite some time, which is pretty awesome that we're getting that now. But it seems strange to me that it was at the cost of the current Veiled Orb Chaos style effect. That especially was a really nice like mid-level entry crafting option for a lot of players. So to have that removed seems like quite the bummer, as you had the the more random but more accessible version versus Ashling's much more deterministic but more expensive, more costly version. So why did you get rid of the regular Veiled effect?
I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say the intention's to just get rid of things, but I also kind of don't see it as a loss to be able to kind of, where possible, not retain every single little crafting thing. I would say that the crafting is, at this point, like quite bloated in a sense of like, it is quite hard for someone who isn't reading into and studying profusely to figure out exactly how to craft the best item. And that's not necessarily a problem, but taking the opportunities to remove something that is honestly just bloat at some points is a win, especially if we can find a way to bring it back into the game a different way that feels a bit more core and fundamental. And maybe you'll find that with, say, the Necropolis crafting system. Like, that is, in theory, a start to end game meant to be crafting. You can do crazy stuff at the end. You can do really simple stuff mid game, early game. And then obviously when we then go to say, is this coming core? Like, how do we want to do it? If we want to do it, maybe it's absolutely busted in so many ways that we don't want to, we'll see. But there's always more crafting things we're adding. Like, you don't have a shortage of different crafting things in the game. Like, it's certainly a little bit out of control in a good way and in sometimes a bad way. And more are going to come. So I wouldn't worry about losing something like that in the short term, especially when, you only need to wait a league or two for things like that to come back. And there are always just so many other ways to craft your items. I don't think losing that is ultimately fundamental. And the win of having, obviously, it be tradable is huge. I am very much trying my best to get around as many of the, services as opposed to trades. We're doing a lot
100%.
As much as possible. Like, I eventually want to make sure we add a thing where, for even mirroring items, even though that's like the nichest of the niche in the game, we're talking about, the select few. I do want it to be that, there is a way that you can do that without having to trade your items to someone. So there are a few designs there even, and, hopefully we will eventually get rid of as much of that as possible, especially when it comes to trusting someone with your item. I don't like that at all. So yeah, we'll hopefully work around. But, obviously, like services like boss kills and all of that, there's not really a lot you can do about that. That's completely fine. But when it comes to actually like loaning someone your item, I'm certainly not kind of in favor of that thing. And so yeah, hopefully we can see the removal of the rest of those in due time. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm super keen on those changes. The So if the thinking is to kind of like slim down on some bloat, I certainly don't disagree that like the the crafting system might have like a bit much going on. I think in this particular instance, the reason why you've seen this reaction to it is this particular one little aspect of bloat. It was actually kind of like used in almost every mid-level craft, so it feels a little bit jarring to see it removed, I guess.
Fair enough, and I guess the answer there is Necropolis will provide one of the most in-depth crafting systems we ever have, and you could argue about Standard League, but I mean, you know, my answer again there is deal with it, and then later on there will be more crafting systems and more new things and more interesting things, so...
I'm not gonna lie, I'm super excited about the Necropolis crafting. I was stoked. The thing I said after last league, I was like, you guys have to do like some sort of crafting league this time. I feel like it's the only answer to like the whiplash of previous league. So let's talk a bit about that actually. So Affliction was a lot of people's potential favorite league, maybe mine. It was certainly extremely rewarding. Why do you think it was so popular, and were you worried about kind of like coming into this league after that? The correction, effectively.
Why do we think it was so popular? I mean, obviously, I mean, at the start, it kind of wasn't in so many ways. It was certainly too difficult. We certainly messed up a bit there. Once things were kind of fixed and once people kind of got their heads around, or you know, around the difficulty of the character builds to handle the difficulty, yes, it became Magic Find Ruckus League. Why was it popular? I mean, it was different. It's not something we had done before in so many regards. It was using new art, and obviously it had bosses, it had all of the stuff. It had so many different kind of reward arcs and existing old ones put into it, like the omens and all kinds of little things. It just had heaps of little detail. The ascendancy classes, I mean, people like that. But ultimately, yes, we can just go to the Magic Find. I'll tell you, I've never had that experience before. I've never, you know, been to the point where, well, not quite like this, where really it feels like the only thing left on the filter is unique leather belts and unique heavy belts and a couple other things, and there's still too many belts to try, and you're still just like, oh my god, there are freaking belts everywhere.
It was a bit too far.
Yeah, to say the least.
I mean, even just from a server perspective, the level of the number of players we could get on a server per server this league was much lower than it has been before, and even that was started to become a bit of a problem.
So the primary issue there is actually what happens is when monsters stay alive longer, because Affliction was making things last live longer, they are getting hit more, and when a monster is alive, they cost more than when they're dead. And so the moment, and then obviously when you've got a Stygian Spires spewing out 700 monsters a second, combined with like, you know, the 50% increased attack speed, soul eaters and all of that, you know, you are nothing can survive that level of absolute mayhem, as in hardware wise. So, but yes, there is going to be a bit of a detox to some degree. But on the other hand, we have changed a lot in the end game to the point where hopefully the meta is so different that it kind of just feels a little bit different as opposed to necessarily like less or worse. There is one other change I'll talk about, and I'm keen for people's feedback. So one problem that we kind of have is that the amount of, like obviously if you were to farm Mage Bloods, Headhunters, etc. via divination cards, like there is a somewhat reliable way to get that. You get your doctors, you get your apothecaries and whatnot. And you saw the new divination card scarabs. Obviously, we're like embracing that. We're not changing anything around that. But one thing that I do consider problematic, and we have made changes around, is stacked decks. So stacked decks, a lot of those uniques are coming from stacked decks. And so we have actually made some changes where the league rewards of various leagues, especially the ones that were quite high, so stuff like Tujin and a few other leagues, we have cut back on the amount of stacked decks they're giving. And you're like, oh wow, nerf my fun stacked decks. To compensate for that, and what it has allowed us to do is we have actually multiplied the drop rates of your Mage Bloods, your Headhunters, etc. by 2.5 times from world drops. And the intention there is that you are seeing more from actual drops instead of just from stacked deck spam. we've kept stacked deck. It was certainly on the chopping block. It was.
I know you were gunning for Stack's deck, like you were all keen to get that thing out. But I think a lot of the reason was just the idea that one thing that kind of sucks a bit is that you're getting rewards for boss kills that people haven't been able to do yet.
Actually, not anymore. We have changed, which I mean is true that which I don't know if people saw, but stack decks cannot yield divination cards that would give items from exclusive bosses anymore.
Yeah, that was definitely a thing that sucked. Was that like you want the exclusive items to some extent to feel like okay, you proved that you killed this guy by having that item. So
there are some corner cases like the Gambler and the Void that we're doing some specific handling around, but in general, you should be seeing a lot less like random Star Forges appearing before anyone's even killed Uber Shaper kind of thing.
Right.
And also, obviously, you've still got the Voidborn keys that will yield it. You've got Valdo's maps, which will yield whatever people have chosen to give there, which is probably just a bunch of mage blood still. But yes, ultimately, yeah, we want to see a lot more of those drops come from actually killing monsters and from farming divination cards the way we intended, which is by actually farming the counter, as opposed to just mass stack deck farming on a mass level from specific leagues. I hope that is received positively, of course, because I genuinely believe it is better. But let us know. We have a little bit of time to make some changes there if needed.
Right on. I'll let people share their opinions on that one. I mean, to me, it's I like the idea of boss drops coming from the bosses and not just from random stack decks. But anyway, it might be controversial. We'll see. Chat says W. So a lot of wins in chat, so it seems like mostly positively received. You can feel a sigh of relief, perhaps. So I think everyone agrees that Affliction was like probably a bit crazy on the economic side of things and what was dropping and everything like that. And I must say, like, I played the most I've ever played this league. And I was getting to the point, like, in that 2 months phase where I was, like, doing things and creating builds and doing content that I just hadn't done before. And I think a lot of players had that same experience. And looking at the overall economy, I expected with how crazy the league was for things to be ruined. But because that term gets thrown around a lot when an economy is different. But the like end result felt really positive for most people. Where like, sure, some things, like if you were trying to compete with the Giga Juices for the items that they were trying to buy, like their bows or whatever, then yeah, you were having a hard time. But for the most part, a lot of stuff was really accessible. And it felt like a really fun league in that regard. And that was actually the biggest, I think, contributor to why it was such a fun league for myself and I think many others. Do you have any thoughts on that and like that economic shift and other ways that could be captured?
I mean, I love it. I love how the economy goes wild based on the content we add. It's always interesting to watch and whatnot. I wouldn't say I have any strong feelings one way or another, but I wouldn't say it's like I just want to note, it's not like our intention to, get away from that specifically or do anything one way or another. Like, we liked these things happening organically. We like the community figuring out how to get around that and utilize it. And yeah, I agree. It ended up being completely fine and honestly completely fun. Maybe not everyone agrees. Maybe there are a lot of people who are like, no, it was too hard and I felt like everyone else got ahead of me. We don't know too much about that, but I mean, the league's ending now anyway, so what happened. But yeah, I mean, I do agree. At least I played a lot. My friends played a lot. Like, we certainly got into it. A bunch of people here were playing a lot, and I've heard mostly only positivity coming from outside of the very early in the league where we had some misbalance. Like, the positivity for Affliction was very high. It's actually making me think like a little bit more about how we can find some way to make some of it core, but I don't quite know how to do that just yet. I mean, I don't know if you saw I don't know if it was in there, but one of the keystones has the whole, like, when there's less than 50 monsters remaining, your map boss is empowered by wisps. I don't know if it was in the live stream, I can't remember. Too many things going on. But that's like kind of one way, at least for now. But there's a lot of good monsters there. There's a lot of good, like, I mean, the bosses and the ascendancies and stuff are interesting. It's just, it actually is one of the more complicated ones, especially when you consider the ascendancies and stuff, to try and even think how to put that into core. Like, that's a lot of character power. And you, like, I don't know if we will do that, but ideally, even just the magic finding kind of part of it with some regulation to some degree would be fun to add. But I mean, who's to say the current league isn't going to end up having? Sure, it won't be a magic finding one so much, but with all the crafting and whatnot, it's probably heavily going to, change the economy dynamically, and that will evolve over time as well. So.
I think it's really relieving to hear as a player that you guys are like, you liked what you saw with the outcome of that. Like, I think the technical side of how Affliction achieved that with like, things being laggy and all that sort of problem is not ideal, but the end result was something we really enjoyed. But there's this perception that you guys at GGG are sometimes a little bit grinchy about this stuff where you're like, we don't want you to have items and currency. So it's good to hear that.
I mean,
it's more
I am
positive.
playing the game every league till high end game and mostly to level 100, and I am farming all these things. Like, I'm not sitting there going like, damn, I don't want all this currency. Like,
what I don't like is when you like press Alt in the game and you get disconnected from the server, or like random stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want it to technically break. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say one big shift, like just talking about playing the game here, and like I do want to understand like a lot of what all these QOL changes are, a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what more will be done. And I think a lot of what is coming in Necropolis League with respect to especially all the in-game changes is a resultant of our team playing the game and listening a lot more.
You guys have been playing the game because you did these changes.
Yeah, we started. So I mean, the whole sextant thing is just like, get me away from this. And I'm in game going like, okay, I've just allocated this tree. I'm like, damn, I don't want to play this anymore. And then I'm like, I don't want to have to respec all this, and then it might be wrong again. I want to experiment and try some stuff, and like that's where you then get the loadouts. And obviously I can respec, but I don't want to have to just go trading, which we know is a flawed system currently, and we've spoken about trading a lot and how we are going to improve it PoE 2 and then looking at PoE 1 around that in the future. But like, I'm sitting here trying to buy unmaking orbs, having the most frustrating time ever just because no one's replying to me and all of that. Like I know the pain.
One of us.
And then I'm like, okay, we need some sort of like Atlas tree loadouts or something like that. Like, we need to find a way to have this so that I can play the end game the ways I want without feeling so punished. And this comes into another thing, which is like, okay, like Wandering Path. I want to play the end game my way, but if Wandering Path is quantitatively too strong, then I'm not playing it my way. I'm playing it the way that the meta tells me I have to, because it is too powerful. And so, there's things like that where that comes why we've removed a number of the keystones and whatnot, is because if you feel like you have to do something. And so you could argue, okay, well, nerf the value. Well, now I don't want to do it at all. So what's the point in it existing? If the keystone is into that binary state of feeling like you have to do it versus not have to do it, get rid of it. That's generally how I feel about it, and add something cooler and better. And the new keystones might end up in the same ballpark. And you know what? Might remove them later and add new ones as well. That's just how it will be. But yeah, anyway, I don't want it to be that the loadouts are like everyone has tree A, everyone has tree B, everyone has tree C, because the keystones mean that you have to do that. If people want to do that, because that's like, metas are metas, you can't get around that. But if it's that feeling of I have to do X, that I want to try and get away from, and especially for multiple leagues in a row, like if it's okay for one league, you have fun, and then if you feel like you have to do something that isn't enjoyable, go away. I don't want it. Like, it shouldn't exist.
You love to hear it. You love to hear it. But I have a follow-up question that's completely unrelated. What about the rucksack?
Look, you're lucky you got it for those 3 months or 4 months.
Oh no.
I just know, ultimately. You might see it back one day, but like,
I'm honestly surprised that Chris was even okay to even let you do that.
I don't think he was okay with it.
Really?
I think I snuck that.
You stuck that one in without.
Well, you weren't okay with it either. Like,
I wasn't okay.
We had a massive argument about it.
Oh no.
I assumed that Chris approved it.
He might have. I don't remember, but anyway, the luxury of the leagues is we do get to try these things for 3 or 4 months. And the importance is, when we do something that we are reluctant about or we are in disagreement about, is that we do reevaluate it at the end of that and decide, are we keeping it or not? And it is a firm no on this one. And, like, the good thing is we do, because we have these seasonal cycles, the leagues, we do get to try these things, and we do get to do something that we're maybe not quite comfortable with, just to really test it. And in this case, it's not. It's not staying in.
I mean, I have to respect a firm no, but what? Why? What? Why? How come?
Well, okay, why? Not to put him. I'm sorry to put you on the spot,
sorry.
but you know,
Okay.
I was on one half of the argument.
Hang on. So you're first of all.
Oh no, I don't want to keep it.
First of all, Mark ultimately gets to decide this, but at the same time, my feeling on this stuff is that I don't like it when you have a build choice that results in more inventory space, because that kind of thing like leads to sort of weird incentives that I don't really love. Like, you know, it's like, if you have to, it's like if I have to change my build to get more inventory space, that just doesn't feel right to me. It's a little bit hard to explain exactly why that is, but like there's various things from games like that where
I do actually agree with that one. Having it be on a class is certainly not the right
That was
answer.
weird.
I also just personally don't think, I think inventory space limitation is a good thing.
Right.
I think that pressure is good, and
Man,
I don't have a personal
I
problem
just think it's
with
so
playing
good
with
to
it.
have like a little bit
Obviously,
extra
it's
space
nice
for
to always just
currencies.
have more and more and more and more. But I do think that pressure is interesting, and I do think it is important to have pressure on how much you can pick up and leave a map with. Especially after Affliction, I was leaving every map with a full inventory, going like, holy, there's more things I want to take and I can't, and literally there's stacks and stacks of currency on the ground I can't pick up. But I think that is healthy and good, and it makes you make the good decisions.
I don't disagree with that, but I don't think this was actually about the space. The reason why everyone loved the rucksack was that it was a separate space that allowed it to be much easier to manage things like your map rolling currency and your scrolls and just that random shit that fills up and clutters your inventory that you constantly have to deal with when you're shifting stuff over to back and forth your stash. There's a real problem
even if it was
there,
half the
quality of
size,
life problem that the
I think that'd
rucksack
be really
inadvertently
good.
addressed, and that's why people loved it, I think.
Fair enough. There are some. Well, at least, okay, so if that is say the problem of rolling maps, for example, like there are better solutions to that, I would say, which is
It's not
like,
just rolling maps, it's having it like
again, I hate talking about this because now everyone's
going
to want it, and it like makes it sound like it's certainly going to happen, and it isn't necessarily. But like surely a like inventory attached to your map device that you can open that like contains your fragments and whatnot.
I guess you can't put stuff in it and meet like from the map when you pick it up, I guess.
Like, from the map, sure, but if they're just talking about like, you know, the whole bringing a bunch in to roll all your maps and like, I don't know. There's more to discuss, but I saw this one on the old quality of life bingo sheet that was there, and I have been thinking about trying to find ways to solve that one, and so I'm hoping that we can find some way to either mitigate or solve that one in the future. Again, no promises, but you know, we might come up with something.
Yeah, I can see there being another solution, and I'd be fine with that because like to me, it's not the fact about getting the more inventory space; it's about solving that quality of life issue. So if there's another solution, I'm here for it.
There probably is. It's just whether or not we can do it and whether or not we can come up with it in a reasonable time. It's all a resources game at the end of the day. So, look, I am keeping an eye on those bingo sheets. I am I'm tactically picking the ones so that we can't the bingo can't be completed.
Keep making them bingo sheets.
Not actually, but one thing that is important with a lot of these quality of life, we are actually, especially with PoE 2's development, we are looking at a lot of these things which have been hard nosed and really reevaluating, and it's like,
I think PoE 2 really has
cool.
like, but just because like as well, I think as well, just like watching like new player experience videos and things like that, and just like looking at all the stuff that people are doing, and like it's kind of it's really another shot at like looking at all that really core stuff again and thinking about it. And like we just don't often think about some of that stuff very often because it's been there for so long. And then, so yeah, just having a chance to like really reevaluate everything really then starts to make you think, well, why is PoE 1 even like this? You know, like it ends up making those changes.
Like we on Path of Exile 2, obviously you have I maybe shouldn't spoil it, this is what I'm going to. We have on Path of Exile 2, we obviously have no more portal scrolls, and I'm not saying that we're doing that in PoE 1 just yet. However, well, I say just yet, maybe ever, but however, in PoE 1, what we are adding is, and it's come from the bingo sheet, is a bind key to just instantly open a portal that you can bind, and you don't now have to open your inventory to do it. I think having to open your inventory during a boss fight or something is not look, with pausing, that's kind of more acceptable because you can now pause, use the portal, and you don't risk danger. But messing around with that in the midst of combat is not something that you should really have to be doing. And the changes to PoE 2 portals is what really made us reevaluate that. So yes, in 324, we'll do the classic video probably after this or next week or some with us actually showing how it works. There will be a bind for instantly opening a portal, assuming you have a portal scroll in your inventory.
Sick. Yeah, love to hear it. All right, that's fantastic. There's been another thing that's been mentioned a lot in chat, which is, do you have any brief comments on the state of some of the lesser used ascendancies, like Gladiator, for example, and any potential reworks or improvements coming to them?
I certainly want to. I always love doing that. And last time, obviously, with Chieftain, we missed the mark. But now during Affliction with the League meta, obviously Chieftain grew into fit a little bit with the Fulcrum and whatnot. So, it's kind of interesting that in last live stream, we discussed that one not really hitting where we want, and now it's got a lot more uses, and maybe this coming league, it'll have a lot less uses. We'll see. It's quite fun how the league changes what people play. However, yes, ascendancy class balances are nice. Effectively, we just have to, again, look at what resources we have and decide how much we can do and where we want to target it. Generally, we have a big discussion towards the end of each league development and think, what are we going to do next? Look at the problems, look at what we want to do. And we have a list that's bigger than we can do. And often those things are on that list and we have to weigh, like, are we going to do option A or option B? And sometimes balancing an ascendancy class is overall less gain for the players than something else we want to do. Like, if you would rather multiple Atlas trees and or a Gladiator rebalance, I would hope to think the majority of people are going to be picking the Atlas tree feature. Maybe not everyone, but again, it's better for the mass, and thus, like, that is what we do. So yeah, it is a resourcing issue at the end of the day. Like, you can only do so much with what you have, but we do a lot. Like, don't get me wrong. But yes, we would get there eventually. It will come up in one of the things, and it is something that we will commit to.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to wrap up Path of Exile 1 Q&A now. Thanks for the very long discussion session. I feel like we could chat about a lot of this stuff all day. Another thing I could talk about all day is Path of Exile 2. We're going to now be talking about Path of Exile 2, both the new reveals from today and some broader questions also. So let's dive into it. The star of the show today was the Ranger, which I had the pleasure of playing at the for a few hours myself, and it really showcases how much the impact of the WASD changes, that movement system, has had on the overall design of the game and skills. And I imagine now you've just like gone back and had to look at a bunch of different skills and think, how do we change this now to move?
And honestly, it wouldn't be incorrect to say that the WASD change is partially responsible for the delay of PoE 2 in some ways.
I thought so.
Because after we changed that, it's like, oh geez, like, and it's like I almost knew this would even. It's like as soon as I was like playing it, I'm like, oh man, like there's gonna be so many things people are gonna want from this. And it's like, yeah, like you do something like that, and then now every class has to change a lot. And we haven't, I think, even yet still fully explored all the implications of that around for some of the different classes. But so like yeah, it's just changed a huge amount. And the thing is, as we look at each class again, it's like, well, like, so we at the demo we did in LA, which we didn't show here on stream, by the way, but there'll be footage of it coming out from the various streamers who were there. We also showed the fact that when we went back to the Warrior again, which is a class we already showed, and then we were looking like we're playing around with WSD for melee, we kind of like immediately kind of had this like feeling of like, oh, now that we've got like facing direction being a thing, we'll be able to have active block now, because you can choose your facing direction. You can have a button to raise your shield up, and that will mean that that feels good with WSD too. So like that's another example of just like you add this, you go to another existing class, like, oh man, now we could have this, and then you go to another class and oh man, we could have this, and like it's just yeah, it's just kind of turned into this giant mountain of repercussions for everything. So yeah, it's been a bit crazy.
It seems like it's a really good option now for you to distinguish the classes and the skills further now too, because you can have like the slippery, elusive Ranger where nearly all of its skills can be shot while moving, or you have the Warrior where nearly everything is a bit more stationary, a bit more explosive in that regard. Have you found that?
Well, I don't know that I wouldn't. Don't know that I'd say that the warrior is particularly stationary because every skill has movement in it. But
Sure,
what it
sure.
does have is the fact that, and all the other thing as well is you don't lose control of your character either, even while you're moving. It's just that you're more. But it certainly is dangerous when you've got a slower skill, even when it's moving a bit. Like so that double. Sorry, it's called rolling slam now. The rolling slam skill, like you have to choose when to use that, and that is definitely a feature of the warrior that for the ranger you don't feel the same way, right? Like on the ranger you can definitely just kind of like you feel very free to move around all the time, so like that is a hugely different feel. But at the same time, we always want to make sure that there's that feeling of like I've still got control of my character. I can still do what I need to do. So even when you've got like this sort of slower attacks on another class, there's still there's still like a feeling of control, or at least ideally there should be. Yeah, like that's I guess that's sort of ultimately really important to me. You just never feel like you're losing control of your character.
How does the fact that like you'll have these differences in movement between different skills and potentially builds affect things like boss and monster design, and how do you like balance
Well,
against
yeah,
classes that do have to stop a bit more?
this is the other big thing is that like I tell Mark, hey, we're adding this now, and he's like, oh my god, we have to go through all the monsters again.
Yeah.
You know,
It was like it was dodge roll, and then it's like, oh no, like we have
Yeah.
to go through and make sure like every monster, every skill, everything we have to go, can you be dodge rolled or can you not be dodge rolled?
Right.
And we have to make that decision. And then it's like, finally we got through all of them. Oh, and here's active block. I'm like, oh no.
Well, so yeah, because we've added now an indicator on attacks that implies they're unblockable. That means they're
Yeah.
unblockable. But also, all the bosses have to make sure that there's the right ratio of blockable to unblockable attacks. You know,
And there's a few things you cannot get wrong. You cannot have the AoE look like one thing and it is actually another thing. Very bad. If you have a telegraph or anything and it looks like it's going to do a 20 radius and it does 30 radius and damage, people will immediately, even on one boss, people will be like, this game has bad hitboxes and blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing is if you all of a sudden are using active block and a skill that you think should be blockable isn't blockable and we don't like telegraph that properly, again, you'll have the same problem where you now don't trust that feature throughout the whole game. So it's like, not only do you have to get it right, you have to be ultra meticulous with it and just be like, you know, should this be blockable? Should this not be blockable? You have to ask several people like what they feel because sometimes it's in a gray area, and generally if it's in a gray area, you have to say yes, it is blockable because 50% of people will think it is so. And so yeah, holy, the amount of times you have to go through all those monsters and change everything is not low.
But then even with like moving while shooting on the ranger, like because then once again you need to make sure the monster composition of each area has monsters that can catch up to you and hurt you even while you're moving, which is actually a little bit more complicated than initially seems because just even the smallest amount of movement, like depending on what the monster attack times are, will cause you to not get hit. So then there's like a whole bunch of tweaking you have to do there as well.
Yeah. There's a lot more monsters that have a kind of step or lunge attack as well to counteract this now. Right. So when they run up to you for the first time, in order to maintain momentum, the same thing the player does, they leap forward and attack, and that has the capacity to hit a moving target. But even projectiles on bosses, it's like if you are moving just a tiny bit, like a projectile is going to miss. Yep. So now you have to think, okay, should it have predictive firing? Yep. Or do we just have to increase the speed enough? Like
we've added tracking to way more boss abilities. That like so the tracking has to be way tighter. So like with even with the first boss, we had to upgrade the tracking to like to target you so that you have to dodge roll way towards the end of the attack, because then the moment you've got moving while shooting on one class, it's like, well, that means that that class was just trivially moving away from that ability. So suddenly the boss tracking has to get an upgrade, and like everyone kind of has this thing, but the repercussions have just been immense. But I think it is worth it.
Oh, it feels so much cooler and so much better when we get that right. Like 100%. Yeah.
That was going to be my response. Like with the hands-on, like the boss fights, they feel incredible. And I noticed what you said, where you have to you really have to get good at skilling the dodge because it needs to be right before it goes off, not like the early dodge, which is something I'm much more used to doing. And in Path of Exile 1, you only get hit when you stop moving. So I can see how that was like an issue here.
We are certainly getting away from the just run in circles for 99% safety. And I think that is an absolutely amazing thing. You still kind of run in circles just because you do dodge generally in one direction over another. But like, it's not just I am 100% safe while doing orbits around monsters or a boss. There's a lot less of that, which again makes everything just feel way more engaging, and you can't just I mean, if you want to pause, you don't need to run in circles now. You can just pause and take a breather.
I know this is like blown out the beta dates for you, and it's been a lot of work, but the net result here should be far, far better.
Well, I
gameplay.
certainly think so. Like, it's just, yeah, like I felt really bad about missing that deadline, but like, yeah, it's like at the end of the day, like if we have found a game that is better than the one we were making before, then we have to make that game instead of what we were making before, like regardless of if it pushes the date out. So yeah, like that's ultimately, I think. And like, to be fair, it wasn't just that. Like, there has certainly when we came to do polish, and it's interesting actually going back in. So it's been so long since we really polished the start of a game before. Like, and it's weird bringing back all the memories of what we actually did back in the early days of PoE 1 that I'd actually totally forgotten about, like all the little details about actually doing that again. It's like, it's actually kind of really interesting going back again and doing it. But I had forgotten what it takes to get the start of a game to feel good. And like, it took longer to get Act 1 to a right state than we expected. The annoying part about it, especially, is that we kind of only really realized this as we had kind of, as you know, like I would say probably like a month and probably a month and a half ago, that this wasn't going to happen in time. And we had already like booked in everything for the event that you went to, and then now we were like in this like ultra crunch scramble of like, we have to get this to be good enough for all of these influencers who are going to be playing like the game and recording it and so on, and ready for that. And I think that even what we delivered there, like, even though I think like it was great if you like played in a similar way to what we have been, or things like that, like there were actually some balance holes you could fall into that meant you had a really bad time. And I do worry that some people kind of fell into those holes and like just didn't end up having a good time with it because like of that. And so that's kind of like probably one of the more eye-opening things to me, is like there was way more variance in the experience than I was hoping for. Like as I said, yeah, just some people just like ended up with the like not finding good items, like not find like, or just like the skills they happened to pick, the combinations that were like ones that just didn't like work as well as others and things like that. And so, that's a bit unfortunate. But if you did have the good experience, I think that like there were certainly people there who got the experience we wanted to show them. And it's really good to see that anyway. So hopefully you're one of the people who sort of, found that you had some good stuff going on. But I'm obviously very interested to hear more about your feedback in particular.
Yeah, that's the interesting question I kind of have from this, is that like, there's no doubt this is a very difficult game. Path of Exile 2 is very challenging, but myself and a lot of the other creators I talked to really like enjoyed the way that the difficulty was done, and especially the boss fights I felt were incredible. I really, really enjoyed them, but it was very easy to see people who didn't have such a good time. And so, like, where do you want to try and get this game? Like, and how do you balance these two things?
It is very hard, and I think that it's especially hard due to the fact that because the bosses have learnable mechanics, like it's hard for me to go and have an objective like play session on another class, because I already know the boss. And so like that means that to actually find out, I have to watch people play who haven't played before, like play again, and that makes it really, really hard. So like, even like I will, if the mechanics of the boss gets changed, I will then I will be dying, and like I think that's great. But once I'm no longer dying anymore, that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't still things that other people are gonna have trouble like learning or doing. But I think the worst one is that and that I think people ran into here as well, is that there's something about the item system in PoE 2 now that's leading to too much variance. And we're actually, I was discussing with Mark before this what's going on there, because it's not obvious to me yet even why that is. Like the things like the amount of IPD you can get in a weapon and stuff like that, these are basically the same as what they were in PoE 1. We haven't really changed the mod pool very significantly. So like there's not a lot of changes there, and yet the experience that people are getting with regard to whether their items are good or not, seems like the variance seems to be higher. So I need to like find out what's going on with that and like see if I can address it. But I think that what it might end up being is that we have to try it. Like it can be subtle stuff like to do with quest rewards, or like what's going on with the shop and things like that. we can give people tools to be able to fix their own itemization problems, so they don't fall into the whole like, I just didn't find a weapon, like that kind of problem. Like it really sucks.
There's I think it's the issue of small sample size, right? Not in terms of the number of players, but in terms of the number of items you're getting. Like there's a scarcity to the items in PoE 2, which overall felt really good, but it does mean that when there's like generally a lower number of items dropping,
Right.
there's
That
a
means
bit more
there's more.
chance that one player
Yeah.
will have a rare bow and the other one
Yeah.
will have a white bow.
There's definitely that element, but the hope is that gold would help with that.
Yeah.
So that you can use gold to effectively,
it did.
well, you get to choose your own dropper. I don't know how much you engaged with the shop in particular,
did,
but
yeah.
So like knowing to go to the, like, 'cause that's the thing, like in PoE 2, the shops matter a lot more because they actually have good items in them. Like there's like it's like majority blues and above in the shop. Like that sort of helps. But yeah, it's like that sort of stuff. Like, but then okay, there's one other thing though that I would say is that and this is another one which I'm not sure about, but it's sort of interesting to me, is that when we've been doing our first time user experience testing, the feedback has not actually been that the difficulty is too high. And I think that might be partly to do with like an expectation calibration, where it's like, because these people in those tests have not played PoE before, they're not expecting anything one way or the other about how difficult of an experience it is. So they, I guess, might be kind of like more fine with the difficulty actually, which seems kind of counterintuitive.
This is just what it is. This is the
yeah,
game,
like a new player is actually like, oh, the difficulty's fine. Like this is just a difficult game. You know what I mean? Whereas like a PoE 1 player might be like, this is so much harder than PoE 1. Which is like kind of a weird situation that I did not expect before doing this event that we that we just did. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting one as well. But yeah, there's quite a lot of things there that are going on. But yeah, we really have to get that nailed, and it's going to require, I think, a lot of good alpha testing and things like that as well to make sure that everything there is good.
It might be a thing where it's just something you have to approach with a safety net mindset, where you have like things like you mentioned, having some gold so that the safety net can be items from the shop. And another idea that myself and a bunch of the other creators kind of discussed at the event was the idea of like having a slow passive flask charge generation, so that as a safety net, players who are struggling in a boss fight can play defensively and slowly get flasks back that they can use to keep them stay alive.
I certainly agree that what I don't want to do is a change that will push the top end up as either, because the top end I think is fine. Like you can definitely feel powerful if you get good stuff. Like there's video footage that that I've seen of people killing some of the bosses, like still actually just like 10-second boss kills because they upgraded like to their bow or mace or whatever to like something like with an alk that was very juicy, and like things like that going on. So the top end is still absolutely possible to like really annihilate shit, but it's that bottom end, like people falling into holes, that I'm concerned about right now.
It's a fascinating like design problem to approach.
Right.
This with Path of Exile 2, and I'm super interested in seeing how you guys have been evolving it and will continue to evolve it. Something I also noticed about like difficulty was, and it certainly came up at ExileCon, was the issue of stuns, getting stunned by monsters, just how brutal they can be. I felt like it was definitely better here. I don't know if it was just me getting better, or if you guys
changes were made, so it should have been better.
Okay, but it still was something that the thing that stood out to me the most was like getting stunned while mid-air using escape shot on the ranger. And
that should not be the case. There should be iframes in that skill, certainly.
Okay, so
yeah, I think that might
not quite right.
We did have a discussion recently where a number of those like jumping skills should effectively be kind of considered to dodge rolling.
Yeah, we need to add it.
It can just get a bit abusive because you can just be like jump, and it. So we need to figure something out with that just to make sure it's not like
Well, that was my question actually. Was like, these skills, have you considered the idea of them having like, when you are winding up, you can be stunned, and when you're like winding down, you can be stunned. But
it would have to be there's a short window in there, so that you don't feel like, well, you're literally like 5 meters in the air.
That'd be good. Yeah,
you're getting hit.
It looked a bit weird.
Yeah.
Sometimes it did look quite cool and brutal when like a werewolf would do this like lunging attack and swat me out of the air. And I was like,
you probably want to make it so that like when you're 1 meter in the air, you can still get hit, but as you're above that, then that's when the time when it doesn't. It also looks a bit silly. It also looks a bit silly when you get frozen when you're 5 meters in the air as well. So that one.
We need fall damage.
Oh yeah, fall damage. Sure, why not? Yeah.
We're gonna have to push the beta back now because you're gonna design like a full Z level system and fall damage and
Well, I
the
mean,
extreme
people
damage
haven't.
from
I don't
height.
know. Have we even shown any areas with subscenes yet? I guess we might not have.
Uh-oh.
I'm not too sure.
There are multi-story dungeons and that where you can see from
God,
one
hell
floor to the
yeah.
other in PoE 2. I don't know if we even showed that anywhere, but anyway, whatever.
It's so good.
So it's
Using
certainly a
the
shame
same
about
tech
the
that they've
delayed
used in
beta,
other
though it's pretty understandable
stuff
given
now.
the. It's not like you hear about the idea of like feature creep in a lot of game design, but here it's kind of the opposite, where it's like core game design creep.
Right.
It's like you guys have discovered things that you want to do way
Right.
more impressively with the core game, right?
Mhm.
But for looking forward to the beta, what will the beta end up looking like? Actually, I've been curious about this. Will it be like a full campaign, a partial
Yep.
campaign? Will there be end
Yep.
game?
Yep.
Any
All
thoughts
of
on
that.
that? Yeah,
So
just yep.
basically, we want so okay. Look, the intention here is that there's no point getting feedback on something. Well, I suppose it's entirely true given what we just did. But if the game isn't like if I don't think it's good, there's no really a lot of point getting feedback from other players. And so like what I'm saying with that is that we okay, what I'm really going for here is like, okay, when we release the game, I want it to feel like I think it's a complete game from end to end and that it's a great experience. And then at that point, we get players to try it and see. Like, I think that betaing just like one act or something, like the only value that you could have in that is something like a load test or something like that. But I don't think you can actually get like proper feedback for the whole game. So to me, you have to have the whole game. Like maybe we don't have to have every single class, but like I definitely think you have to have at least the campaign and the end game there. Now in the beta, what we won't have is like so we'll have an end game in the beta, but it won't include all the end game content that the final game will have. But it will have an end game because you need that in order to be able to test the economy properly and so on, right? Like we need to know what happens when people get to max level and like all of that other stuff. Like that has to be there. So I want that game to like certainly the beta should feel like here is a full game. Like I could have just I could have just bought this as a new release and that and it would feel that good. But of course the main thing is that we need to be able to the reason why we'll call it a beta is because we need to be able to still make balance changes and be free with that, right? Because if we couldn't do that, then that would kind of defeat the purpose. So we absolutely need to have the freedom to still make balance changes after that point, but it should still feel like the complete game. Like this is the game, right? Sure, maybe it's missing a couple of classes, but it's that is the game with everything there you'd expect from a full game to have.
That's good to hear because, like, I think the difficulty with giving feedback after ExileCon was that they were pre-built characters, and that kind of misses the point of the game because character building is such a big part of the game, right? With this event,
this is the reason why we want to do the LA event and actually get people like yourself to really try that. Once again, we got some really interesting information from that, like looking at that, because there were more holes than I expected. So there's clearly more work to do there.
We got to build characters, and you got to see stuff that you didn't expect, like
for sure,
used in ways you didn't expect and stuff.
For sure.
So damn good.
That was pretty cool. You're like, oh, I didn't think anyone would use that skill that way.
Well, the one that was the most annoying, that was a total mistake, was the crossbow. Like there was some balance on the crossbows that was like left in there from when we did the Act 5 demo, where like it was just like, and then that all just kind of like fell back all the way to Act 1, and then people forgot to like actually balance that properly again. And the reason why is because like we didn't even the crossbows have their own skills built in, and the balance of those was not really correctly working with all of the regular scaling that we do for other weapon types.
I thought
and
so.
So someone found one of those and then just proceeded to shotgun all the bosses down in like 5 hits.
Default attacking the bosses with crossbows.
When I saw that, I was like, oh my god, this was not how this was supposed to go. So there was a few mistakes like that in there as well.
Yeah, these things happen. These things happen. So I think people are immensely curious about seeing Endgame. We haven't seen any real Endgame for this yet. What is it going to look like? What a character build's going to look like? How fast is the gameplay going to be? Is this something you can speak on or show soon?
I mean, we will definitely have to be showing it soon, but I think that a lot of it comes down to when we're finally able to really play through the whole game legit and and get there, because you just need to make sure that you're feeling the power progression as you go through the game going up and up. One thing that we haven't really been showing a lot until the Ranger demo just now was actually using support gems. Like we
Mm.
just haven't really been showing too much of it. And in the Ranger there, we finally showed like a couple there, but that certainly was not like a full 6 links for everything, which is what it's going to be in Endgame. And even just with like in the Ranger demo there, when you started to add like multi-proj and chain to a couple of things, you start to see the kind of like, you know, crazy power that you expect to see from PoE. And so it will certainly go even crazier than that. I guess what's harder to say is, okay, like I don't want it to be just like the whole screen is covered to the point where you can tell nothing, you can see nothing about what is going on. Like it needs to still be like, you know, at a somewhat like just from a visibility perspective, it needs to look reasonable, even if you are like, you know, covering the screen in lightning explosions. You still need to, there still needs to be some understanding of what the hell is actually happening. So yeah, like we want the feeling of power, like you want that fantasy of like I'm becoming a god. But we also need to try and make it so that there's still like some level of counterplay and interest in using different skills and like having a good time with the boss, even while you're feeling that way. And so that is the challenge, and that, you know, that's what we have to try and hit.
I look forward to seeing how it plays out because, yeah, if I have any fear, it's actually that like you lose some of that impactful moment-to-moment gameplay that you're actually starting to capture with the earlier stages of the game.
Yes. Well, that is a concern, and what I want to try and not have. Like, I do want the boss fights to still feel very engaging, and I still even want, like, even in maps, I still want it so that there are sometimes white monsters where you're like, I have to do a bit of counterplay against this. Like, you know, that to happen just sometimes. Like it's so like just not all the time, but just sometimes that can kind of happen.
It harkens back to like the early days of Path of Exile where just devourers were scary, right? Like the monster type devourers were scary. And I felt that with like the werewolves in this one. The werewolves are just scary. They're fast, man.
Well, my favorite monster right now in the demo, you know, the Eternal, I don't know if you fought against them or remember them, but the Eternal Knights in the Mausoleum and Tomb are the ones that have a shield, that they're just walking forward with a shield up. And if you hit them, then they shoot a projectile back at you. And so you have to find a way. Yeah. So you have to find a way to kind of attack them without attacking them from the front, because they've got 100% block there. So you either attack them with an AoE skill from behind, or attack them from above, or like use a degen or something like that. There's like some kind of counterplay there. And as soon as I fought one of those, because I actually had not known that Mark was adding that mechanic to that monster. And as soon as I fought that, I like messaged him like, man, that monster is so cool. Like it's just really cool to sometimes have monsters like that just like, you're like, oh shit, I have to think for a second, you know. I'm a fan.
So specifically in that case, you when something is blocking, they still take stun damage, so they can still get stunned.
You can stun them out of it.
Good.
But you can also walk up to them and they start attacking, and then walk back and then attack them.
And then he'll have a moment in his animation where the shield goes more out like that, and then the blocking is disabled.
Right.
I did not figure that out.
But also, if you use lightning arrows, you can like AoE them from behind, or like, you know, there's the poison burst, which will poison the guy even though he didn't take damage from the hit. And like there's so many ways, but it's like kind of interesting to have stuff like that.
Yeah. People noted the poison on the life globe. Is there other like display of these sorts of effects on characters?
I do want to do more of those. That was added really recently, and it was weirdly cool. Like I didn't expect that change to matter as much as it mattered. But it actually really does, and having more visibility for those different effects is really important. So I definitely want to do more. Like I think that there's definite candidates for shock and ignite and stuff like that, and bleeding, of course. Bleeding being a, you know, one of those ones that would be good to have more visibility on. Like things like that. I think absolutely. I mean, increasing visibility of those mechanics, I think, is super important. Yeah, like we'll definitely do more of that, and I don't think we've exploited like the UI to the degree that we could have before. So like, yeah, just that simple, just make the life orb green when you're poisoning something. Just it's weird how much it matters. So
I also noticed enemy mobs had better signaling of their effects as well, like a shield if they were protected or whatever by certain things.
And I want to do even better. Like I noticed I was just, you know, like I think there's more we can do around like feedback for when when your hit's not working, and I think there's like other stuff like that. Like there's just tons of stuff that we should do better there. Yeah, it's as I said, these little tweaks, they matter a lot, so it's cool.
All right. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to both of you. Thank you very much for your extended time for the Q&A. I know people are eager to go check out the patch notes and also all of the content that's released from the LA, as that embargo is up now. So
all right. So hopefully people are watching videos and and seeing what's going on.
So we will say see you later then, and thanks very much for watching, folks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah. See you later.
We're done.
See ya.
All right.
Alright, I'll probably stop the stream now and go over the patch notes off stream, because that's always a bit of a nightmare anyway. And it's getting a bit late. My partner's probably going to start work soon. And we share an office. So anyways, thanks for stopping by, and thanks for watching. It's been a great little reveal. Lots of things to look forward to. Sad about the delay of PoE 2, but it does look very nice and very polished at this point, so it should be worth it. Anyways, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.